Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku was reborn and had demon powers? Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is El Guardian Infernal by Ranger 1863. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. Tears covered her vision. Everything she saw was blurry, although it could also be because her whole world had collapsed and her mind was disconnected from what was around her. He didn't feel the passage of time. It was as if his entire being was disconnected from reality. He barely felt the raindrops that had soaked him several hours ago. The darkness of night had already covered the city of Musutafu. If you want to be a hero so badly, there's a quick way. Trust that you'll be born with a gift in your next life and jump off the roof. The words spoken that same afternoon by Bakugo echoed in his head, words he now thought about with complete seriousness. After your idol, the only man you relied on your whole life, the one who inspired you, who made you believe that even the impossible was possible, told you that the dream you had followed since you were old enough to reason, the dream that had guided you your entire life, was nothing more than a simple child's fantasy. That had destroyed him. What would I do now? All he ever wanted was to be a hero who would help others, someone whose mere presence would bring smiles to people's faces. What was left for him? He was a child without any power in a world where everyone had some ability that made them unique and special. Guided by the intense pain he felt, he climbed the railing that separated the roof of the building from the void beside it. While he kept himself from falling by holding onto the railing, he freed one of his hands, holding his phone in his hand. He had many messages from his mother, the only person he would regret having made this decision for. Using his only free hand, he typed 2 words on his phone: "I'm sorry." With that last message sent, he put his device back in his pocket. Then he closed his eyes and let go of the railing. He felt the air cover his body as he plummeted toward the cold concrete at the foot of the building. The empty feeling caused by his fall only lasted a couple of seconds. Then he felt the blow. It was very painful. The pressure that hit his body was the equivalent of being hit by a truck at 100 kilometers per hour. Every bone in his body broke, his organs crushed together, and the worst part was that he still didn't die. He was still alive. It hurt a lot. Practically his entire body was burning. He tried to scream, but in doing so he choked on his own blood. He was barely able to hear a scream next to him. It seemed that someone had seen him fall. Well, it didn't matter anymore. It was a strange sensation, the embrace of death. And in his last moments of life, he couldn't help but think that he wouldn't suffer anymore. No one would bother him for not having a quirk. No one would hurt him. No one would tell him that his dreams were useless, and who knows, maybe in his next life he would really have a quirk. A small smile graced her face, and at that moment, life finally left her body. He opened his eyes, completely refreshed, as if he hadn't just jumped off a huge office building. He was lying on the ground, standing in the middle of what appeared to be a garbage-filled alley. While he was in a state of confusion, he stood up. He had no idea what was going on. He stepped out of the alley, only to jump back when a car driving erratically almost hit him. Whoever was driving didn't even stop to look at him. They just kept going without caring about the freckled man in the slightest. With nothing to do, he stood up again and walked towards the street. Everything was strange. Well, it was a city, but the inhabitants. It was as if every person in the city had some kind of mutant quirk. Some with unique appearances, while many others were beings of small stature, red skin and enormous horns. He walked away completely confused. He reached for his pocket, but for some reason his phone wasn't there. Had he lost it in the fall? He wasn't sure if that was a possibility. How had he survived in the first place? He didn't understand anything about what was happening. He walked through some streets, observing in absolute confusion everything that surrounded him. He stopped, his eyes wide, unable to believe what he was seeing. In front of him, there was a glass case behind which were several television screens, but those screens were not what had caught his attention. No, what had left him in that state was his own reflection. He couldn't recognize the person he saw in front of him, even though logic dictated that it should be him. He looked nothing like he had just a few hours before. His body seemed bigger, his skin was black, and upon closer inspection, it looked like it was now scaly. His nails were huge and quite sharp. He had a pair of huge bat-like wings coming out of his upper back, which were made up of membranes held together by a few pieces of cartilage, each of which had a sharp claw at the tip, not to mention the long black tail that swished on his back. at least his emerald eyes, freckles, and green hair remained in place. He raised his arm, passing it in front of his face, unable to believe what was in front of his eyes. He put one of his claws against his skin, trying to pinch himself to see if all this was some kind of terrifying dream. He felt the pain, but he didn't wake up. 1AH, Onahe complained. It seemed that his new claws were much sharper than he expected. Suddenly, his claws retracted into his fingers, revealing a black and scaly hand, but without the risk of accidentally cutting someone. One retractable Clausenahe commented, surprised by his new body. Then, before I could start asking questions about what was going on, the screens behind the display case suddenly lit up, showing a white-skinned woman with light blonde hair, wearing a tight red suit. Next to her was a smaller man in a blue suit with a gas mask covering his face. One good afternoon, I'm Katie Killjoy. One the presenter Sadone and I, Tom Trenchone, said the man at the woman's side. One today is a beautiful hellish morning. Just 3 months from the next extermination, dozens of new souls arrive in Helluva. A drop-down screen opened next to the woman, showing what appeared to be a war between a band of skeletons and some kind of bipedal bear. There is a large-scale territorial battle on the south side of the pentagram, so if you are in the area you are advised to take alternative routes, and after the break, we will talk about our great sponsor, where we will see the interview with Mr. Vox in which he tells us about the new cell phones that will be released this season. One said, the presenter in the red suit. Onight's a blessing, one the male presenter said as he took a phone out of his pocket and threw it behind him like trash. One who would want this garbage when there is something better, Onahe said in what could very well be a way of advertising the new phone. After those last words, the screen began to play a series of commercials featuring a man with a flat screen head advertising technology and a substantial amount of porn. But Izuku wasn't paying attention to the commercials on the screen next to him. No, he was thinking about the news anchor's words. One hell, I'm in Helluva, said in absolute shock. He couldn't believe it. He had died, but what there was after death was not another life. There really was a hell. That meant that Christianity was right. And now, he was in hell, trapped forever where sinners were tortured. Why had he ended up here? He was sure he hadn't committed any sin in his life, or at least nothing that deserved to be sent here. Was it because he had committed suicide? That must be why, right? I mean, he didn't know much about the Christian religion, but he was sure he had heard somewhere that suicide was considered a very severe sin. Oh hell, what would happen now? Would some devil come to torture him? He didn't know what to expect. Aw shit. Onia's sudden scream prevented him from panicking further. The freckled man turned his head in the direction where the scream had come from, seeing a short red man with 2 enormous black horns with white spots, a black suit and a white spot covering the right half of his face. Standing in front of the demon on the ground were 2 much larger and stronger demons, who looked at the smaller one with smug smiles. One leave it alone, Blitzo, one said, one of the larger demons. Did you really think you could just come to our territory and take the car? There's no way you can stand up to the scrap dealers. One the other demon said with amusement and slight pride. Undeterred by the larger demons, Blitzo stood up, wiping the dust off his suit. Oniok, first of all, my name is Blitz. The O is silent, moron. Second of all, who do junkyards call themselves? It's a horrible name, and third of all, that's my fucking car. I bought it with Moxie's money, so give it back to me now. One the enraged little devil shouted. One of the larger demons pulled a pistol from his back pocket. Onim already getting tired of hearing you talk, Onahe said as he pointed the barrel of the gun straight at the worried little devil's head. Seeing his possible end near, Blitz closed his eyes. 1 sighed from hearing the sound of the cannon firing. What he heard was an intense scream of pain. He opened his eyes again only to see the enormous figure of a sinner standing between him and the gang members with terrible taste for names. He noticed how a few drops of blood fell from his sharp claws while the demon who had tried to kill him held his arm where he had previously held the gun. Onia, are you okay, sir? One the mysterious boy asked who had saved him with apparent nervousness. Seeing the surprising help, a smile of excitement appeared on Blitz's face. One shit yeah. One the animated demon shouted, before standing next to the freckled man and looking at his former attackers with a huge shit-eating grin. One suck that. You idiots. Give me my car now or this guy will turn you into mush. Onahe threatened despite not knowing his savior in the least. Suddenly, the other gang member pulled his own gun from his back, pointed it at the duo and without wasting any time this time, started shooting. One careful. One the freckled man shouted before using his body to cover the smaller demon, the wings on his back spread out, covering both of them from the bullets. After the demon emptied the entire magazine of the gun on them, the shots stopped, only for the demon to be surprised when all the bullets fell to the ground, none of which had been able to pierce through Izuku's wings. No longer feeling the danger, the freckled man retracted his wings, which obediently folded on his back. One now, cut his throat, one Blitz shouted with noticeable emotion in his voice. The freckled boy looked at the demon on his back in surprise. He didn't want to kill anyone, he didn't even know why he got involved in the first place. Seeing the gun pointed at the little devil beside him, his legs simply moved on their own to protect him. Even if the people in front of him were demons, he didn't want to kill them, just incapacitate them. Yeah, that should work. He ran towards the demon who was not holding a bleeding arm, the claws of his hand extended, and before he could reload his weapon, the freckled man slashed at his chest. 1 One the demon screamed as he fell to the ground, writhing while holding his wounds. The little devil watched the larger demon writhing on the ground. 1 Let him live to suffer. I like your style. One Blitzo commented with an amused smile. Onan, it's not because of Thoton. The freckled man tried to excuse himself while waving his hands in front of him. Before he could ask the little demon another question, it began to circle around him, grabbing his wings and examining them, even taking his hands, touching the tips of his claws with its fingers. One Great. I like you, kid. Onehe said as he inspected her body, even climbing onto her chest, moving his lips to see her teeth, showing some really sharp fangs. 1 You just died, right? Onehe asked, surprising the boy, and before he could ask how he knew, Blitz answered him as if he could read his mind. 1 You stink of the world of the living. 1 The devil told him. As the only response, the freckled man nodded. 1 Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Blitz, and the O is silent. 1 Said the little hellish creature with a smile. 1 What O? 1 The freckled man asked in confusion. Ha, I like you now, how about working for me? Onehe asked suddenly. 1 That? 1 The freckled man asked, completely confused by the impulsive question of the devil in front of him. 1 This place is full of shit, I could really use a bodyguard, plus 1 more from the team wouldn't be bad. 1 The devil answered. Himoneso, what do you say? After all, you just arrived in hell, you have no money or place to live. If you work with me you will earn money and you can sleep in the office until you get something better. 1 The little demon told him, trying to convince him. The freckled man thought about it for a moment. So money was a thing in hell. He didn't expect something like that, although he didn't think that hell would look the same as a city in the human world. He assumed based on this that there should be some kind of society down here, so he would really need something to survive here. 1 I think he accepted. Onehe really had no choice in the matter. He guessed what this was, or living on the streets like a bum. At his response, Blitzo showed a huge smile full of emotion. 1 Great. Now, your first job will be to help me get my car back. 1 The little demon told him with excitement. 1 Stay steady. 1 Blitzo yelled, clinging to Izuku's back. The freckled man was using his wings to fly over I.M.P City, although it was a bit complicated to use his wings for the first time, which is why the duo was staggering in the air, which is why the imp was holding on to avoid one of the freckled man's strong shakes from throwing him to the ground. Onate's there. 1 Blitzo shouted as he pointed at what could only be called a junkyard. Seeing the place, the green-haired man began to descend as best he could next to the main entrance door. 1 Careful. Careful, careful. 1 The imp screamed as the duo crashed next to the entrance. 1 Damn, we're going to have to work on the landing. 1 Blitzo said as he got up from the ground, wiping the dust off his suit again. The freckled man held his head, which felt like it was spinning. 1 Hawks made it look so easy. 1 He muttered as his mind readjusted. 1 What do we do now? 1 The freckled man asked. Blitzo put his hand on his chin, thinking about what his next step should be, when an idea appeared in his mind. A smile decorated his face. Oni will be the distraction. Keep them focused on you while I get my baby located, then we'll take off and leave those motherfuckers looking like a bunch of dick-eating morons. 1 The freckled man nodded. In the past, he would have been more reluctant to enter a gang's base and confront them, but now, in his attempt to protect the little devil, he had discovered that his new scaly skin was apparently bulletproof, so he shouldn't be in much danger. The duo approached the main door, pausing there, unsure of how best to enter the place. One, what the fuck are you waiting for? Break down that door. One, Blitzo yelled at him, causing the freckled man to bang on the door with all his might in a fit of nervousness. Surprisingly for the green-haired man, the door was destroyed by the force of his attack, hitting one of the gang members, who was knocked to the ground. The rest of the people in the place stopped their actions, directing all their gazes towards the person responsible, the young man standing where the door to his hideout had previously been. One, okay Blitz, I think I have your attention, Onehe said as he looked to his side, only to find no one. One, Blitz. Onehe hadn't even realized when the imp had slipped away. One, Destrosenlo. One of the gang members who looked like a humanoid tiger, screamed, causing all the gang members in the place to run towards him. Seeing them approaching quickly, the freckled man got into an improvised fighting pose. As soon as the first of the gang members entered his range, he clumsily hit him in the head. The attack caused the demon to fly until he crashed into one of the walls of the building. Although the freckled man was truly impressed by what he had done with a simple blow, that action did not seem to deter the gang, with which they seized all kinds of weapons, from firearms such as rifles, pistols and even machine guns, bladed weapons such as pipes and knives and even explosives. Everyone present threw themselves at the freckled man. The first group began to shoot with everything they had at the green-haired man, but just like the previous time, the bullets bounced off his scaly skin and fell to the ground without causing much damage. Seeing that this wasn't working, the demons launched themselves at the freckled man using their melee weapons. And the freckled one prepared to face the gang of demons. In his first real fight, there was no option, he had already gotten involved in this, he would have to learn to fight on the fly. Blitzo slipped away, taking advantage of the fact that all the gang members in the place had gone to the main door to confront his newest employee. As he walked inside the large barn filled to the brim with stolen cars, Blitzo scanned every single vehicle in the place, trying to find his baby. He ducked as one of the gang members was thrown into the barn and crashed into one of the stolen cars, leaving him lying against the window, completely unconscious. One, I like that boy. One, the little devil said with a huge smile. He had no doubt that this boy would fit like a glove in his business of assassins. The only thing he was missing was a little more brutality, but he could acquire that with practice. He kept moving forward until he finally saw it, a gray band with his company's symbol engraved on the side. One, my baby. One, Blitzo shouted as he lovingly hugged the band, reviewing with the affection that a man would have with his own son. One, those bad guys didn't hurt you, did they? One, I asked him while affectionately rubbing the body of his vehicle. Then his eyes widened, coming closer to look more closely at the hood, observing a tiny scratch that was barely visible. One, Tiho's sons of bitches. Onehe screamed angrily, opened one of his vehicle's doors and removed the floor mat, opening a hidden compartment full of weapons. He pulled out a gun and a lunatic grin covered his face. Those guys were going to pay. The green-haired man launched another swipe at one of his attackers. Just like many before him, his most recent victim fell to the ground with claw marks on his chest. He turned his gaze towards a group of two demons much larger than him and also much more robust, which charged at him at the same time. He extended his hands, stopping both demons, one with each hand. But despite the Herculean effort he made to keep both massive demons in place, the fight was far from over. Another large demon noticed that the freckled man was temporarily immobilized, so with a sick smile, he took a knife and silently approached the freckled man from behind. The freckled man saw him out of the corner of his eye, but with his hands busy holding back the two huge gang members in front of him, he couldn't do much to stop the one approaching from behind him. And then, surprisingly for everyone present, the freckled man's tail changed shape, turning into a snake attached to the lower part of his back, which stretched out until it reached the gang member behind him and bit him on one of his arms. Immediately, the man's eyes went blank and he fell to the ground unconscious. The freckled man and the two demons in front of him blinked a few times, stunned by seeing the sudden transformation of the freckled man's tail, after which the third demon fell unconscious. His tail retracted to its previous size and returned to its original formanesso. I also have a tail that turns into a snake. I can't find the logic in all this, Onehe muttered to himself. Before the green-haired man could do anything to get rid of the two demons he was holding in each hand, their skulls exploded, staining his face with blood, leaving the freckled man completely in shock. One, you fucking sons of bitches. Onehe heard his new bosses shout and saw one of the most unreal scenes he had ever seen in his life. Blitzo in his car, driving at full speed towards them with half his body out of the passenger window and a huge gun in his hand. One They dared to scratch my car. Onehe roared with pure anger. The green-haired demon felt a chill run through his body. He knew this was hell. Did that mean this kind of brutality was normal? He wanted to throw up. One boy, get in. One Blitzo screamed as he charged at the freckled man. Due to the sudden death that had just unfolded in front of him, he was unable to react in time. The car crashed into his abdomen, knocking the air out of his lungs, but what happened next was not a normal reaction. What came out of his mouth was not just air. A deep red flame came out of his mouth. The flame was very small, barely visible, but the freckled man and Blitzo noticed it. One Do you spit fire? One Blitz asked with a noticeable impression in his voice. He was just as surprised as the devil. One very cool, but not very useful here. Most of us demons are fireproof, Onehe explained simply. Well, that discouraged him a little since it made this power somewhat useless, but hey, he would think about this later. With no other options, the freckled man climbed onto the roof of the truck, holding on to prevent his boss from throwing him to the ground amidst the intense shaking. One shit. They closed the doors. We have no way out. One Blitz screamed angrily, firing left and right through the driver's window, killing a new demon with each shot. The freckled man fixed his gaze towards the main door, a huge black metal door. An idea loomed in his mind. It was risky and he wasn't sure if it would work, but it seemed like the duo's best option to escape from the scrap dealers. One Blitz, drive to the door. One the freckled man shouted. Onate's metal, kid. The car won't be able to knock it down. One the devil screamed. One trust me Onizuku asked. The demon nodded. On I hope you know what you're doing, kid. I'd hate to have to put a bullet in your ass for turning my car into a wreck. Onehe wasn't sure if that last bit was a joke or not, so he swerved the wheel toward the front door. As he approached quickly, the freckled man began to take a breath, his throat tinged with orange as he instinctively gathered fire in his mouth. When he felt he could no longer gather more fire in his mouth, he let it out, aiming directly at the door. Due to the immense amount that accumulated in his mouth, upon releasing it, a powerful burst of fire was released from his mouth, so concentrated and shot with such force that it was as if a heat ray came out with enormous intensity. The ray struck the door, creating a hole in the door through which the duo went through and exited outside. One OHU. One Blitz shouted excitedly, hitting the gas and speeding away in a matter of seconds. One behind the moan one of the gang demons shouted, and they ran towards the motorcycles and accelerated in pursuit of the duo. But as they drove towards the door, they were unaware that the freckled man's heat ray had set the massive warehouse doors ablaze, causing burning chunks of the door to fall from the top of the door, hitting a few, but while such a blow usually wouldn't stop those behind the group, what happened after that certainly surprised the demons present. Some of the demons at the front emerged from the burning pieces of metal, their bodies also burning with orange flames, but unlike what was common for demons, they felt the fire burning their bodies, a fire capable of burning demons, something surprising for hell. Back at his offices, Blitzo stood in the meeting room in front of his employees who were sitting around a huge table. Besides Blitzo, there were two other imps sitting together, a white-haired imp with a dejected look and a woman with a tight black suit, dark hair and a huge, excited smile on her face, while on the other side of the table a female hellhound with gray fur and a bored expression was looking at her phone with a noticeable indifference to everything else. Okay guys, I've gathered you here for two reasons. The first is that production has dropped. I don't blame anyone. Moxie one, he said, confusing the little devil with the bow sitting at the table. And the second thing we'll look at first is, hire a new employee. One Blitzo said excitedly as he stretched his hands towards the sky, releasing some confetti. The surprise on the faces of all her employees was quite noticeable. Even Luna, who usually didn't react to anything, raised her head from her phone with mild interest. Onasir, we barely make any money. You can't just hire someone new out of nowhere. One of his employees, a well-dressed little devil with a bow tie, told him. At his comment, his boss gave him an annoyed look. Hut your mouth, Moxie, you don't know anything about the intricacies of business, you conceited little bitch. With those words, his boss dismissed his employee's concerns, heading towards the door of the room. One come in now, child. One Blitz shouted towards the office door. Footsteps were heard from outside the meeting room. Slowly, a huge figure entered the room. He was large, by far the largest in the room, being almost 2 heads taller than Luna. His most notable features were his black skin, green hair, huge fangs, wings on his back and a tail that swished from side to side. One Eye, it's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Izuku Midoriya. One in contrast to his menacing appearance, the boy looked genuinely nervous and intimidated by the group in front of him. One wow, looks great. One the devil woman commented with a smile of excitement. One welcome to the team. One the girl told him quite cheerfully. The second little devil next to the one who had just spoken let out a sigh of annoyance, more with his boss than with the new imp employee. One well, I guess there's nothing else to do at this point. Welcome. One SHE looked him up and down, analyzing him carefully. One by the way, how old are you? Onehe asked with slight interest. One I am 16 years old. One the freckled man responded with some nervousness. Moxie tilted her head to one side. One a little young to get down. Harry Onehe commented with a hint of curiosity, but other than saying those words, he didn't ask any follow-up questions. With his little introduction over, Blitzo pointed to one of the office chairs next to the gray-furred hellhound. Obediently, the freckled man sat next to the female without saying a word. It wasn't that he was trying to disrespect the lady, the truth was that he had no experience dealing with women. Besides, it didn't seem like it bothered her that he didn't say anything to her. One okay, now back to the main problem. Our number of contracts has dropped. We must find a solution, one Blitzo said as he walked in front of a small whiteboard at the front of the office. Nervously, the freckled man raised his hand towards his boss. What's up, kid? Onehe asked while pointing at the green-haired boy with one of his markers. Maybe I should have asked this when you offered me the job. But what exactly does this company do? The freckled man asked. In all the excitement of what had just happened, he had forgotten to ask that very basic question. Shit, did I really not tell you? Blitz said distractedly as he rubbed the back of his head, before his expression turned into a huge, excited grin. This is the perfect opportunity for you to watch my commercial. Onehe said with considerable emotion, then took a remote control out of his suit and pointed it at the television on the other side of the screen. The television turned on and played the I.M.P commercial. The more time passed, the commercial unfolded before his eyes. At the same time his face became more and more shocked. He saw the demons in the same office as him, stabbing, crushing and shooting human beings. Yes, human beings. From what he saw in the commercial, they had a ritual that gave them access to the world of the living. Their business model was to receive orders from the sinners here below and then kill whoever they were told to above. When the commercial ended with Moxie shooting a kid, taking him to the doctors, and then being thrown out a window when they were told they didn't have insurance. By the end, the freckled man's face was pale, although it wasn't very noticeable because of his skin covered in black scales. They were assassins. He had agreed to work for a company of assassins. What the hell had he gotten himself into? What did you think? Blitzo asked with an excited smile. At first, the freckled man remained silent. Now he understood how Blitzo eliminated those demons in the dump so easily. I think it was good, the freckled man commented, even more nervous than before. See. In your fucking face, Moxie. Blitz mocked his employee who looked increasingly irritated. I told you that commercial was a great idea. Onehe shouted at him with emotion and mockery. It was a waste of money. They even overpaid me to appear on a show that no one watches, and if we're talking about why we don't have clients, then maybe Luna should improve her treatment. Moxie shouted, accusing the woman next to the nervous freckled man, who raised her middle finger in response. Eat shit, Moxone, he answered without looking up from his cell phone. Then Blitz jumped on the werewolf, hugging her tightly even though she growled as if she was about to tear her boss's arm off. Yes. Don't blame my loony toony, she's perfect, she doesn't have to change anything. Oneh's boss responded in an overly affectionate manner. Enough is enough. One's new scream caught his attention. The freckled boy turned his gaze towards the back of the room, where he found the same child from the commercial lying on a stretcher. I can't stand it anymore. I tried to pretend I was unconscious so they wouldn't kill me while my quirk healed my wounds. But I can't stand it anymore. I want to die. One shouted the irritated and perhaps a little offensive child. One a regenerative type quirk, huh. Those are rare. One the freckled man thought at the child's comment. At least he no longer felt so bad about the doctors who kicked him out of the hospital for not having insurance. One hey kid, calm down a little. One Blitz told him before he was abruptly interrupted by the boy. You're a selfish fucking clown and I'm a kid. I like clowns, even the ugliest ones. One the child screamed on hey you, that was very. One Moxie tried to yell at the boy, only to be interrupted by him. One if I wanted the opinion of a talking goat I would ask for it, don't you believe it, stupid talking goat. Onehe yelled at the little devil with the bun. Anna that's my husband you're talking about. One the little devil next to him screamed, oh, so they were husband and wife, I didn't know that marriage was a thing in Helluva. Ha ha ha. One the boy mockingly sneered that your husband. You seemed like a bitch to me, but I didn't expect you to take it so seriously. One the boy said, causing Millie to growl in anger. One and you. Onehe said while pointing his finger at the Luna. What about me? One I asked annoyed. One nothing, I don't talk to dogs, I prefer cats. Onehe said, visibly annoying Luna. Finally, the irritating child turned his gaze towards the green-haired boy. One and you're shaking like a fucking epileptic, you're the biggest one here and you look like the biggest coward, seriously, you must really be a fucking useless one. One ouch, those words really touched his heart. Memories of his childhood came flooding back to him. The image of a certain childhood friend with an explosive quirk superimposed itself over that of the boy in front of him and suddenly, an anger that he had been repressing for many years began to take root in his heart. Why did fate make him suffer like this? Why did it give someone like Bakugo such an amazing gift while he, who always dreamed of saving people, had nothing? Was it some kind of cruel joke? Why did he have to die, going to hell while Bakugo enjoyed himself in the human world, surely laughing at his death? It is said that we all have a dark side, even the purest and greatest men in history have had a little voice in their mind that tells them to do bad things, and Izuku Midoriya is no exception, but in his mind, those were not the thoughts of a hero, so he repressed those instincts, that fury, that hatred, deep within his being. But now, after he committed suicide, after he went to hell, after everything he went through, instigated to take his own life by the one he thought was his friend all this time, he finally hit rock bottom, the mental dam that controlled all those bad thoughts broke. It was too much anger, too much hatred, he needed something or someone to take it out on. The sound of a phone notification barely registered in his mind at the time. One damn, hey, I got a message from the client, it seems like he was the target. Luna said simply. One who? One Blitz asked. One Heion Luna said as she pointed at the boy. One are they? One the boy pointed to himself. One did the client really want us to kill a child? One Blitz asked. Anna that's what he said. Luna replied with a shrug. Blitz was about to draw his weapon and blast a hole in the boy's skull, when suddenly a huge burst of flame hit the child on the stretcher. One ahhhhhh. One the boy screamed as the fire began to consume him. Everyone turned their gaze to the new employee in the room, who was breathing out a long, destructive burst of flame at the boy, which stopped after a few long minutes, leaving behind only a pile of ash and charred, unrecognizable pieces. One shit, one Blitzo said, really impressed. At that moment, the freckled man began to breathe heavily, controlling his instincts again. It barely registered in his mind that he had just murdered a child. One genial one I hear Luna say next to her. Suddenly, all the I.M.P employees at the table stood up, starting to approach him and compliment him on what he had just done. It was the first time he had been congratulated by someone other than his mother. It was a warm feeling. He looked at his new coworkers, noticing the air of excitement and camaraderie that filled the place. Maybe working with assassins wouldn't be so bad. And then, with a smile, the freckled man joined the pleasant atmosphere that filled the place, listening to his new coworkers introduce themselves and start friendly conversations. It would be a bit difficult to get used to his new life, but even if he was in hell, he was willing to enjoy this new opportunity. The freckled man walked with a slight animated hum through the streets of hell, holding several bags in his hands. His coworkers had asked him to go to the market to pick up some things. It was his first week in hell, and after settling into a small room in the I.M.P offices, he'd finally start his new job as an assassin today. He had struggled with the idea that he was now trapped in hell and had agreed to work for a company that traveled to the world of the living and killed anyone their client ordered them to. Here below, a business model that 2 weeks ago would have horrified him, but that now he was beginning to accept. The last week had been really painful for him. Between accepting that he was dead, in hell, and that he had killed a human child, he had suffered quite a bit. But luckily for him, the demons he was now working with were surprisingly kind and understanding for, well, demons. Especially Millie and Moxie, both of whom had spent most of their days by his side, talking and comforting him. At this point, he had come to accept what he had done. What did it matter? After all, he wasn't even human anymore. He accepted that he was now a demon, condemned to live down here because of his decision to take his own life. The moment in which he took that child's life, he hadn't even thought about it much. Useless, that word, that damned word with which they had referred to him all his life, hearing it again here made him explode. He didn't realize what he did until the anger faded in his being. Then his coworkers approached him, congratulating him, encouraging him. The worst thing is that he didn't feel anything when killing him. That feeling caused him to lock himself in his new room inside the I.M.P offices last week, feeling guilty for the fact that he hadn't felt anything when taking a life. But in the end, I ended up accepting it. Anyway, if the kid really was good in his life, despite how rude he was, he would go to heaven, and if not, well, I hope not to run into him here. It would be really awkward. It was strange how quickly he seemed to get used to the idea of murder. Was it because becoming a demon had altered his mind, or was his dark side much bigger than he had initially thought? In any case, he decided not to try to find those answers like on his third day in hell, simply accept his current situation and live based on that. He accepted that his old life was over, the Izuku Midoriya that he once was no longer existed. He died, accepting that he decided to end his old life, and although with his new job he had access to the world of the living, he simply couldn't try to return to his old life being a demon. Leaving his thoughts aside for the moment, the freckled man entered the building where the I.M.P office was. Getting on the elevator, he went to the office floor, but the moment he entered, on surprise. The freckled boy jumped back slightly as his coworkers jumped in front of him, firing confetti guns and throwing balloons. The freckled boy was surprised to see the office decorated with streamers and a huge sign hanging out front that read, "Happy First Day of Work." As soon as the initial surprise faded, a smile graced the freckled man's face. Thank you, the freckled man said while rubbing the back of his head, somewhat nervous. He wasn't used to people throwing parties in his honor like this. It was a quick celebration, eating cake, laughing, drinking, and talking to each other. Even though he knew these little devils were murderers, he couldn't help but feel better in their presence than he had been surrounded by humans when he was still alive. When the small party in his honor, held for his first official day on the job, was over, Blitz made them put away the decorations and wait for his next client to arrive. Apparently someone had scheduled an appointment for later, which only meant one thing: it would be his first job as an assassin. Although at the moment there was nothing to do, which meant his first work lesson, what to do when there is no job. He thought about what it would be like to do paperwork or fill out information about previous jobs. This certainly wasn't in his expectations, although he didn't complain about the breaks in the reception room either, although he wasn't sure he would call this a break. Moxie stopped shaking. "You're going to shoot our only support," Millie told her husband, who had a large crossbow aimed at a family photo Luna was holding while lying on the couch. Wow, I feel so appreciated here." The hellhound said to the devil's comment, although without taking her eyes off her phone which she was holding in her other hand. The freckled man looked at the photo they wanted Moxie to shoot. It was a photo of a family. He knew what he had said and that little by little he was starting to get used to the idea of killing. But even so, he was still reluctant to kill innocent people, or in this situation, a family. Just take a deep breath and let it out. Millie explained simply. But it's a family. Under what circumstances would we have to kill a human family? The little devil asked. Unsure of the doubt that the green-haired man had formulated in his mind, he raised his hand with the intention of asking a question, as if he were in high school. Excuse me, the freckled man called in a slightly low voice, still acting nervous. What's up, honey? Millie responded kindly, tilting her head slightly and smiling at him. I wanted to ask this a while ago, but how does this company's system work? I mean, Do we kill anyone who tells us to? The sinners are just the bad guys, because honestly I feel a little uncomfortable eliminating innocent people. One the green-haired man expressed his doubts calmly. The devilish woman waved her hand casually with the intention of calming her new coworker. One well, it's not really a good business to select who we kill. It's best to simply eliminate anyone the client asks us to. One Millie explained, noticing the green-haired man's conflicted look. Oh, don't worry little one, you'll get used to it in time. Onehe said with the intention of reducing the inconvenience of the freckled. Although that answer didn't do much to calm the freckled man's nerves, surprisingly, he wasn't the only one in the room who felt uncomfortable with that kind of hitman. One I agree with the kid, I would understand if it was a shitty dad or a mafia family, but to wipe out the entire bloodline of a normal upper-middle-class family altogether, I don't know, it seems like a very bad thing, even to us. One the little devil explained his opinion. Suddenly, Luna got up from the chair. You don't know if they are innocent, the hellhound woman explained, sitting on the armchair and pointing with her hand to each of the family members in that photograph. One this kid probably sets dogs on fire, maybe this girl bullies Australian boys online, and the dad probably watches porn. One Luna explained. One exactly, humans are full of dark secrets, that's why so many of them end up here. Onh's wife explained, throwing a look at the freckled man at that last sentence. One no offense little one he said to the green-haired man, the only sinner in the group. One justice isn't the job here Mox, killing for money is, so hit the target his wife said as she squeezed his cheeks, ending her rant with a kiss. With that last word from his wife, Moxie leaned back in, aiming his crossbow at the photo. Just before he pulled the trigger, Blitzo suddenly opened the door to his office as he was escorted out by the client he had been meeting with moments before. One guys I want you to meet. One that scream accompanied by the loud slam of the door surprised Moxie, causing her shot to go wide and the arrow to bounce all over the room. The arrow bounced off the office walls, hitting the monitor next to the married couple, passing through the family photo Luna was holding, heading towards the green-haired man, who spread one of his wings in front of him, where the arrow bounced towards the furniture that held an aquarium full of eels, after which, it went towards the client with whom Blitz had just left his office. Surprisingly for the freckled man, his boss caught the arrow in the air before it pierced the sinner's skull. One our new clientonehe presented it with a smile, just before the eel shelf broke, releasing the creatures which unleashed an electric shock, which combined with the water, set the entire office on fire. One damn Moxie. I just bought those eels. One I shout with quite a bit of irritation. A few minutes later, the group was outside the building, watching as the firefighters left the office, loading the eels. One goodbye. And don't worry, we'll finish that bitch off in less than 24 hours, or your first kill is free. One Blitzo shouted as he waved goodbye to the woman, who was leaving in a taxi. Once they were alone, Moxie turned to his boss. One when do we start implementing that deal? One asked the devil with the bow, who was surprised when his boss grabbed his cheeks. One when you burned down my beautiful office in front of our client, the freaky scrotum face. One Blitzo shouted angrily, after which he threw his employee aside. One now someone tell me that fancy book is still intact. Onehe shouted angrily, although the freckled man felt a little confused, he wasn't sure why after his office burned down, the first question his boss would ask would be for a book. Honestly his boss didn't seem like the type of man who read. One you mean our only way to get to the other side, here it is one Luna said as she pulled out a large blue-covered book with gold details. That's why you're my favorite loony, have a prize Onehe told the woman as he took out a bone-shaped cookie. One how horrible one Luna said, after which the devil threw the cookie in the air, catching it with his tongue and devouring it. You're disgusting. One the furious hellhound screamed. As they talked, the freckled man approached Moxie and Millie, who were drawing a pentagram with chalk on the side wall of the building, which, with a movement of Luna's hand, the pentagram lit up red, showing a forestone. Okay, now let's lick some ass. Onh's boss shouted. Onates said, kick ass, Blitzo. Millie corrected him. One mine is better. Onh's boss replied before walking through the portal. Unlike his companions who passed through the spherical portal without paying much attention, the freckled man stood in place for a second, took a deep breath, gathering his courage before finally taking a determined step through the portal, which closed right behind him. The group arrived at a house surrounded by a fence in the middle of the forest, The freckled man took a moment to breathe in the fresh air, feeling the breeze on his face, listening to the birds sing and sniffing the scent of the nearby trees and plants. It was curious how in his demon form he had more refined senses, being able to hear, see and smell things that he never could when he was alive. But anyway, leaving those lively feelings aside, the freckled boy turned his attention to his team. He wasn't here for fun, he had a job to do, and although he was still unsure about it, he would have to at least follow his team until he got used to all this. The team of 3 imps and the sinner sneaked to the side of the house, watching from the window their target, a blonde woman serving food to her brown-haired husband and 2 children. Oh ho ho ho, this will be so easy. One after making that comment, Blitzo turned to the freckled man. One kid, do you want this? It'll be your first official job. Onh's boss asked him. The freckled man watched the seemingly happy family, with the married couple rubbing noses affectionately. He wasn't sure why the client wanted this woman eliminated, but personally he didn't feel comfortable with this. I mean, if he were an evil dictator or a torturer of humans he might consider killing her, but from his point of view she was just a housewife who had done something to anger a sinner. Oh no, I'm Finionehe replied to his boss. 1pfff, whatever, fine Moxie, then you'll take care of this one, Onh's boss told the little devil. 1 time's up Moxone before the little devil could do anything else. The group was surprised to notice how their leader was now holding a huge rifle which was pointed directly at the blonde woman's skull. One I already have you, bitch. One Blitz commented aloud as he aimed his rifle scope at the woman's skull. One wait, sir, are we really going to kill a family? One the bun demon asked with noticeable concern. One no, don't be silly, we'll just kill the mother, to ruin a family. One I explained before turning my attention back to the gun's sight, pointing directly at the woman. One I hope sir, I think we should first. One before Moxie could finish his sentence, his boss fired the gun, but at the last second, Moxie moved the gun slightly upward. The bullet passed by the woman and crashed into a mirror behind her. One what was that Ralphie? One the blonde asked, surprised to see the broken mirror next to her. One I don't know Marta, but whatever it is. One the man paused briefly as he reached under the dining room table. One it will be what we have for dinner Onehe said after taking out a huge rifle from under the table, smiling in a psychotic way. All right guys, get your guns out. Onh's target said as he pulled another shotgun from under the table, as did his children, who also drew their weapons and smiled just as crazy as their parents. One we have to hunt children the father said. Outside the house, Blitz was scolding him. One what the fuck was that Moxie? One the imp asked. But before he could receive an answer from his subordinate, the freckled man jumped on him, covering just as a bullet passed through the wall of the cabin, crashing into the freckled man's body, which did not penetrate his skin. One child. One Blitz shouted. One I can't move. One the freckled man replied, although he was aware that he was not hurt, somehow he was unable to move his body, he was paralyzed. It must be that man's quirk. One run. I'll be fine. Onh's companions gave him a worried look, but with no other option they obeyed the green-haired man's request. Don't worry kid, we'll come back for you, one Blitz said before running off alongside Millie and Moxie. The freckled boy watched the 2 adults leave his house and run towards his coworkers, leaving him lying on the ground. He wasn't sure if they hadn't seen him or if he had simply ignored them. In any case, if this was a quirk, with any luck it would be a time-based paralyzing quirk, so maybe he could move in time. But before the freckled boy could do anything else, he felt hands grabbing him and pulling him. He felt horrible that this had happened without having the chance to defend himself. He just hoped the others were safe. He felt how they put some kind of sack or something to cover his head. He couldn't see where they were taking him. He wasn't sure how much time passed or where they took him exactly. He only knew that at some point they tied him to a chair, and when his nerves were starting to increase, they finally took the sack off his head, although what he saw made him wish he could keep the sack on. He was sitting in a chair with the 2 children of his target's family standing in front of him, looking at him with a look and smiles that made the green-haired man's blood run cold. One hello kids, one the freckled man said in an attempt to reassure the children and negotiate their release. Oh, it's nice to have a new doll to play with. One both children said in a grim manner. The freckled man turned his gaze towards the ceiling of the house, realizing the horrendous environment that surrounded him. People stuffed and hanging on the wall like trophies of the house. aprons made of human skin and faces extracted and placed on the wall like paintings. He felt nauseous seeing all this. These children, no, this family, were monsters. One shit, one in this whole situation was enough for the freckled man to utter his first bad word in years. The married devil couple ran toward the dock near the house, jumping into the water and hiding under the dock while their target's husband searched for them from above the dock. When the creatures are surrounded, they will not be able to continue hiding. One the man said from above the dock. From under the dock, Millie signaled to her husband, indicating that he should come out from the opposite side to her so that they could attack the man together from different directions. With no other options to preserve his life, the devil with the bow nodded silently, and with a signal from his wife, they both jumped from different directions towards the man. Millie came through the dock from behind the man while her husband came from the front. The duo attacked from both sides, Millie with a knife while Moxie pulled a long gun from inside his jacket. But before Moxie could shoot, the man threw a small piece of wood at him which hit one of his horns, immediately after which the demon with the bun fell to the ground unable to move. One Moxie. Onh's wife screamed in concern as she saw her husband fall to the ground. The demon circled around the man, standing between him and her husband, after which she jumped on the man, who smashed a bottle he was holding, knocking her out. While Moxie remained on the ground, at least he hadn't lost the ability to speak. One, what did you do to me? One Moxie asked. The man smiled psychotically, approaching the devil and grabbing him by the hair, lifting him up and putting their gazes facing each other. Onate's my idiot quirk, stun projectiles. Anything I throw or shoot will paralyze anyone it touches for 10 minutes. One the man explained, taking his wife and dragging both imps deeper into the forest. Meanwhile, the freckled boy watched in disbelief as the girl brought a knife to his face and ran it across his cheek, but to the surprise of the two children, the knife could not penetrate the green-haired boy's skin. Both children took out knives and tried to stab the freckled boy in several places, but were unable to open his skin. Then the girl realized something and her maniacal smile widened. She brought the knife back to his face, but this time it was no longer aimed at his cheek. The edge of the knife was directed directly towards his eye. The freckled man knew that his skin was tough, apparently because it was covered by hard scales, but he wasn't sure about his eyes. There were no scales there. He doubted that part of his body was as tough as the rest of his body, and he would rather not go blind from losing one or both of his eyes. And then, as if by a miracle, he regained mobility in his body. It was quite easy for him to break his bonds. He took the girl's knife and using only his hands, broke it. Then he looked at both children who now seemed afraid of him, with good reason. He couldn't leave them. It didn't matter if they were children. They were monsters. He had to eliminate them and their entire family. He would do the world of the living a favor and finish the job. It was the best option he had. Looking at the children with blind rage, he held out his hands in front of them, showing them how his sharp claws emerged from his hand. Don't worry, I'll make sure it's quick. Onehe took a quick look at all the corpses in the place. One, I guess that's more than you've done for your victims. One, and with those last words, the freckled man ran towards the children with his claws extended. The three devils were tied to a pole while their target's husband poured gasoline on them. One Satan. We return your filthy creatures to the pits of hell. One, the blonde woman said as she waved a torch in front of her. One, may the root of evil remain honored as we continue the work. One, and after saying those words, the blonde woman threw her torch towards the group of imps. In an instant, the flames spread, covering the three demons quite quickly, but out of the expectations of the woman and man, the imps did not burn. One, yeah, that's not how it works, miss. Fire doesn't do anything to us, but I can fake it if that turns you on, Blitzo said as a small mockery. One, oh shit, well, I'll shoot them in their smart ass mouths, and the woman said as she readied her rifle towards them. One, it would be more effective, one Blitz admitted stupidly. One Blitz. One mister. Onh's two subordinates shouted at their boss. The woman pointed her shotgun at them while laughing like a witch. The three little devils closed their eyes, waiting for their end. One groaned, but a sudden growl interrupted the woman. One, that. One, the blonde asked loudly, turning around in the direction of the growl, only to see a huge humanoid creature with black skin and green hair leap towards her. The creature opened its enormous jaws, revealing large, sharp fangs, biting directly into the woman's neck, piercing her trachea and spinal column, separating her head from the rest of her body with a single bite, killing her instantly. The green-haired man slowly stood over the woman's corpse, giving her husband a murderous look as blood dripped from his jaws. The man turned around, running at full speed, trying to escape from the freckled man, who began to take a breath. It was something strange. His intention was to use his fire breath, but instead, his throat did not shine with the typical orange glow that indicated that his fire was charging. It lit up a bright yellow, although at that moment he did not pay much attention to that fact. And when he unleashed his attack, this time what came out of his mouth wasn't fire, it was lightning of a bright yellow color, as if a storm unleashed all its fury from the freckled man's mouth. Although the man tried to flee, there was no way he was faster than lightning. The attack electrocuted him, burning every one of his muscles and organs, leaving behind the charred remains of a man. Once all the targets were eliminated, the freckled man turned to his boss and co-workers, extending his claws and cutting their bonds. "One well done, kid, but don't think I'll give you a bonus or anything for this," one Blitz said as he dusted off his suit, while Moxie and Millie hugged each other and rubbed noses affectionately. "One okay, let's go home," one the boss said as he took his phone out of his pocket and dialed Luna to open the portal back to the underworld. His companions quickly crossed the portal while the freckled man took one last look at the world of the living. It was strange how foreign this place felt to him now. To be honest, probably the only thing that could still interest him in this world was his mother. This world was no longer her home, and although she could come here whenever she wanted thanks to that book, she honestly didn't feel the need to return, although who knows, maybe one day she would find the courage to talk to her mother and ask for forgiveness. With that last thought, the freckled man turned and walked through the portal, back to his new home. The freckled man was sitting in the waiting room of the I.M.P offices. Today had been a slow day. They hadn't had any work, so now he was wasting time with his co-workers. Izuku, Moxie, and Millie were sitting around a small round table, each holding a deck of cards that they were exchanging with the deck in the middle of the table, while Luna ignored them, leaning back in the armchair while looking at her phone. The freckled man couldn't say for sure, but he suspected that the hellhound had a strong hangover. When it was the freckled man's turn, he took a card from the deck before throwing another card with a 4 of clubs on it onto the table pile. I've been thinking about this for a while, but are books about traveling to the world of the living common in hell? The freckled man asked as he watched Moxie take a card from the deck and then throw down a 10 of spades. While his wife followed the same procedure with the cards, Moxie answered the green-haired man's question. Well, the demons who work for the sin of lust, Asmodeus, use crystals to go to the human world to seduce and drug them, but we don't have access to those things, Onehe said as he watched the freckled man make his move. The freckled man made a face of confusion. So where did Blitz get that book? The freckled man asked, smiling slightly at his mallet. Moxie took another card from the deck while absent-mindedly answering the freckled man. Onehe made a deal with Prince Stolos of the Goetia family. In short, he gives the book to Blitz and he has to return it once a month on a full moon. The devil explained. The boy's look of confusion remained. That seems too beneficial for Blitz. What does that prince gain from his deal? The freckled man asked in confusion. Millie, who seemed just as excited as always while playing, was the one who responded this time. Blitz has sex with him every month after the full moon. The little devil explained simply as she took another card with a face lit with joy. His chest froze for a moment, surprised by the girl's explanation, and although it wasn't noticeable due to his scaly skin, he was flushed. Sex, a familiar but completely foreign concept to him, hadn't had time to think about it, but he had, in fact, died a virgin. He understood that for many, that concept was not at all pleasant, and considering what he'd seen in his short stay down here, he doubted many people here would be in the same situation as him. While the busty man was drowning in his lack of experiences with the opposite sex, it seems that he remained silent longer than expected. Hey Izuku, it's your turn. Millie told him as she adjusted her hand right in front of his face. Hearing the words of the devil, the sinner in a slightly draconian manner returned to reality, filing away his current thoughts for later. He returned his attention to his game. So Blitz is like an overpaid whore? The freckled man asked, trying to use the most vulgar vocabulary, what he was trying to implement in himself. As someone once said, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, so if he lived in hell, he should start getting used to speaking like the natives and his co-workers, at least a little. That comment seemed to amuse the married couple considerably, even Luna, who let out a slight laugh from her armchair. "One not bad kiddo," the hellhound commented with a slight smile. The freckled man alarmed in response, before throwing his cards on the table. "One royal flush," Onehe said, revealing his cards, causing the two married imps to let out groans of annoyance, and with a rather big smile, the freckled one gathered all the money in the center of the table, carefully putting it in the pockets of his clothes. "One do you want to play again?" "One," the freckled man asked. Millie took more money out of her pockets, putting it on the table. "One, I won't lose again." "One," the girl said with great conviction. The freckled man put more money on the table, putting his part of the bet. "Just like Moxie, one, it's easy to win when you barely taught us how to play on," the little devil grumbled. Although he also put in his money, teaching them to play cards had been the best idea in the freckled man's life. Apparently most devils are unfamiliar with human games. So he had an unfair advantage in the game, added to a couple of demons who liked to play and bet as a couple. It translated into easy money, which helped the freckled man a lot since he had started saving up to get his own apartment. Don't get him wrong, he was very grateful to Blitz for letting him sleep at the office, but he didn't want that to become something permanent. He didn't want to abuse the devil's generosity. Besides, he would like to have his own place. The freckled man began to shuffle the cards in his hand, preparing a new game, but before he could start dealing the cards, a loud shout from Blitz's office interrupted him. "One team, my boy, I need you. We will go to Lulu Land." Oneh's boss shouted from his office, which made the freckled man suspect it was a megaphone. What the hell was Lulu Land? I had never heard of such a place in all my time in hell, but before I could ask anyone present, Millie unexpectedly jumped towards Blitz's door and crashed through the window with stars in her eyes. "One Lulu Land." "One," the woman shouted quite excitedly. "One, where to land?" "One she asked the devil's husband in confusion, opening the office door. The green-haired man stood up as well, walking towards the door and standing behind the white-haired imp, just in time to see his boss shout through the megaphone again. "One Lulu Land." Oneh's boss shouted with an emotion that could be on par with the little devil's. "One, what is Lulu Land?" "One," the green-haired man asked, but before he could answer his question, the sinner with a draconic appearance jumped slightly in slight fear upon hearing Luna's furious scream that echoed in the office. "One's hut the fuck up." "One," the hungover hellhound screamed. The black van with the imp logo on the side parked outside a huge amusement park filled with all sorts of huge themed rides, and in front, a huge arch with the words, Lulu Land. Moments after the van parked in the driveway, the freckled man landed softly beside it. He had been practicing a lot with his new demonic abilities, especially with his wings. He would hate to crash again because he didn't know how to fly. It would be too embarrassing. He wasn't sure why he had all these abilities in his sinner form. From what his imp colleagues told him, it wasn't normal for a sinner to come here with so many abilities. There were sinners with wings, fire breath, even parts of their body, which were snakes, but the strange thing was that they would all be together in that form. According to Moxie, the form of the sinners depended on the state of their soul when they died. The normal thing was that they only had the form of some animal related to them, or that they adopted forms related to their personality in life, which meant that their unique and peculiar form was probably due to something related to their soul or their death. Unfortunately, his reasoning was forced to stop when he saw Moxie get out of the van and open the side door, letting out the two royals inside. Stolos was a demon of great stature and extremely thin. He had very long legs. His appearance was one that made him remember an owl with an extra pair of eyes on top of his head and dark blue plumage with white parts. He wore a white t-shirt with a huge hat in the shape of an apple with a big smile. From what he'd been told, these two were some big shots in hell. They were pretty high up in the hierarchy down here, and if his coworkers were to be believed, he was also really powerful, with really strong abilities that could turn him into a bloodstain if he angered him. But from the description he'd been given, the guy was apparently pretty chill, so as long as he didn't anger him, he doubted there would be any problems. Curiously, the royal who had hired them and who was sleeping with their boss did not come alone. Accompanying him was a young lady who gave off a depressive aura, with bad posture and a lock of hair covering one of her eyes. The girl came out, looking at her father with shame while covering her face. The group entered the interior of the enormous theme park. While the freckled man looked at the place with curiosity, it had been truly surprising to find out that there was an amusement park in hell. Just one more reminder of how similar Hell and Earth were. This is nothing more than a job. My team and I will not cater to your perverted bird ways, do you understand? His boss said quite sternly, while the green-haired man looked at the attractions and products they sold in the place. The daughter of the prince of the Goetia family seemed uncomfortable being here. One dad, it's necessary. One the young woman was about to say something when Blitz unexpectedly interrupted her. One wait for a second love Onehe stopped her before turning to address his father with much more seriousness and a threatening tone. One if you try to grab me by the ass in this park. One before he could finish what he was going to say, Prince Goetia interrupted him. One you are very cute when you are serious. One the prince said as he pressed the devil's nose with his fingertips. While the two were arguing with each other, following them from behind, Izuku and the pair of imps found themselves following the prince's daughter. The freckled man was feeling a little encouraged with this job. He had never worked as a bodyguard before. Well, bodyguard was technically his position in the company, but honestly all he did was kill like the others. It was interesting to do what he had technically been hired for. Plus, Blitz gave him some sunglasses. Suddenly, Octavia stopped. One I think I'm going to throw up. One the girl said as she watched her father's interaction with the imp. Moxie seemed to take the girl's statement very seriously. One man, I knew this was a possibility. One the little devil said as he searched inside a fanny pack to find what he had with him. One what do you need? Paracetamol, ibuprofen, morphine. Onehe said as he took out all kinds of pill containers and at the end quite a few needles full of morphine. One it was figuratively, grandfather the teenager said before walking away. Leaving the imp duo behind, the freckled man hurried to catch up with the young Goetia. One I apologize for that. Moxie can take things too literally. One the freckled man said to the princess. The young woman raised her gaze slightly so that their eyes met. She didn't know anyone who worked for the guy who slept with her father, so she didn't even know the name of this sinner. One this is garbage, I stopped liking this place when I was 8. One although that wouldn't stop him from giving his opinion. The freckled man tilted his head in confusion. One if you really hate this place, why didn't you tell your father? Onehe asked in confusion. The teenage owl exhaled in annoyance. One as if he heard me. One buffo. One my life is already shit. I don't need my father to desperately seek a connection with me. One the young woman complained. The signs of daddy issues were pretty obvious, even for someone like him who in life had no social life or father figure whatsoever. One it sounds complicated. There wasn't much more the green-haired man could say in this situation. As they paused briefly in their conversation, a sudden, high-pitched squeal was heard a couple of feet behind him. What's up friends? One followed by a terrified scream from Moxie. One I'm Lulu, welcome to Lulu Land. If they're pissed off here, they'll just try to demand us. One said the peculiar apple-shaped pet. After the appearance of the demon disguised as an apple, the elder Goetia approached his daughter with a noticeable emotion in his gaze. One look via, it's Lulu, the prince said as he pointed at the pet with obvious excitement. Onia question. One the young woman said with a noticeable tone of irony in her voice. One just a little question. Ajiajiahia. One said the apple, laughing strangely while jumping a few times which caused its eye to pop out and hang from a thread, giving a slightly disturbing appearance. One is it true that this park is just a cheap copy of the more popular Lucifer Lulu World Park? Onehe asked with a huge mocking smile. At the comment, the pet stopped jumping, seeming more serious about the matter. No one he answered curtly. One this place sucks in security and corporation. One the teenager said, causing her father to let out a nervous laugh, after which he took his daughter by the hand and led her to another side of the park. Let's go to an attraction. One the man said as he took his daughter to another part of the park. What a strange girl, don't you think? The park mascot asked the group of assassins, not caring about the man's comment. Blitzo walked reluctantly behind the two members of the Goetia family. Wait until your dad tries to play with your balsan, the devil said before walking away, followed by Izuku. What did he mean? The pet asked the two remaining imp members, but before his wife could say anything, Moxie stepped forward. Stop talking to me. I know there's a pervert in that costume. After that, he took his wife's hand and walked away. Once the man in the costume was left alone, he lowered his shoulders with slight sadness. Adone, he said finally, accepting the devil's words. While the married couple stayed behind, The freckled man and his boss stayed behind the Goetia family, making sure that no one would harm them and that there seemed to be many demons with hostile intentions towards the two members of the royal family. The freckled man looks back momentarily, noticing the nostalgic way in which Millie observed everything around her. One hey Blitzo, his boss told him that he raised his head to look him in the eyes. One, why don't you give them some time off? One, the freckled one asked him. The little devil thought about it for a moment while he watched the couple, then he took a glass from the park without paying for it and approached the couple, apparently accepting the freckled man's proposal since Millie's eyes lit up with joy and she took her husband by the hand leading him towards a terrible roller coaster. With the pair walking away, the imp chief followed by his only sinful employee, walking behind the Goetia, Blitz with his rifle in hand moving almost comically through the crowd, aiming at anyone who looked suspicious, in contrast to him, Izuku. He walked calmly through the streets with his hands inside his jacket, looking to the sides making sure there was nothing suspicious. Watching a dark space between the park stalls, where some devils with knives, ropes, and guns could be seen, the freckled man growled menacingly, showing his large fangs, an action that caused the would-be kidnappers to hide back in the shadows. It's exciting to see you working, Blitzy. One, the freckled man saw Stolas speaking in a sensual voice as he leaned back, running his finger over the imp's head. One's hut up shit. I'm working, one, his boss replied. At that action, the prince's daughter rolled her eyes to the side. She should go to a room, her daughter complained. To his daughter's comment, Blitz responded with annoyance. One, hey, I'm not a day whore. One, the demon replied, causing a mother demon who was passing by him to make an annoyed face at his comment. One, what? I said I'm not, you nosy bitch. Onahis boss responded while raising his middle finger to the woman who was carrying a baby. One, look at that via. One, the prince said as he took his daughter's head and pointed his hand towards a circus tent with many advertisements of a clown. One, you used to shed tears of joy at that show. One, the Goetia family member said with excitement. But unlike her, the princess's eyes widened with fear. One, oh no one, that was the only thing the teenager said, apparently remembering something terrifying that the freckled man didn't know about. One, I hate that fucking clown. One, you might be slightly surprised to hear the teenager and her boss say the same thing at the same time. You were sure there was an interesting backstory here, and while you were curious, you were also aware that this wasn't the time to ask questions. What a pain. And in that moment of distraction, the freckled man saw how a bunch of imps took and tied up the prince in an attempt to kidnap him. Noticing the weak attempt at kidnapping, the freckled man's tail turned into a snake and stretched out at great speed, sinking its fangs into the neck of one of the kidnapping imps. Immediately afterward, the imp's skin turned a pale white, after which he fell to the ground and began to convulse while foam came out of his mouth. Seeing the freckled man's poisonous attack, the rest of the devils ran away. Surprisingly, instead of thanking the freckled man, the prince stood up, breaking his bonds and walking towards him with an annoyed look. Did he save me? He's supposed to be my Prince Charming, not you, one, the prince claimed. The green-haired man raised his hands, hoping that the prince wouldn't destroy him or something like that. One, I'll make sure Blitz saves him next time. One, the freckled man said calmly, hoping that would reassure the man. One, G Udon, he said before realizing the turn and walking towards the circus tent. Once inside, Izuku sat on the bench behind the two members of the royal family. One, ho ho ho, hello little devils, it's me, the robotic Fizzeroli, created specifically to bring you an amazing show celebrating the Lulu Land with a double O. Can't be sued. Come on, one, and with a snap of his fingers, the lights came on and the show began. The freckled man watched the robot. Apparently there were robots in hell too. Dance and sing, showing other animatronic animals with terrifying appearances playing music to the robots singing, which sang about good behavior, dancing, and how it apparently had no respect at all for the copyright of anyone whose ideas it stole. Then he heard a gunshot and saw Blitzo shooting another kidnapping imp in the back of the head. One, wow, what good aim you have, Blitzy. One, the prince said with a smile full of lust. Apparently this last act of his father was the straw that broke the camel's back. One, I can't stand it anymore. One, and with those words, the young woman stood up and ran towards the exit. One, wait, Octavia. Onahis father said as he ran after the girl, being followed by Blitz and Izuku. As the duo ran after the two members of the underworld royal family, the robotic clown suddenly set his sights on one of them. Oni, oh ho 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 ho, is that Blitzo my sensors are detecting? It seems like the kids keep running away from you. Ha ha ha, one the robot asked while adopting a mocking pose. The devil stopped his chase to answer the clown. One the O is silent, no one, his boss replied, looking at the robot with a lot of resentment. One OHHH, just like your audience did when you told those cheap jokes, ha ha ha, Nehe said while moving his articulated arms like snakes. One listen bitch. He made more money killing people than you did being a cheap copy of an overrated fourth-rate clown. One the annoying little devil shouted. One UHHH, how jealous, you're wrong, because they love me. Does anyone love you? Blitzo Nehe explained in a very expressive way, saying his boss's name in a grim way. The freckled man approached his boss, whispering in his ear, one Blitz, we're supposed to keep the Goisha safe. Onehe reminded him, on take charge, I'll just chat with this son of a bitch. Onehe answered. He was sure that chatting with him didn't mean talking, but right now he had to make sure that both members of the demon royal family would be safe. If something happened to them and he didn't pay them, he was sure that Blitz would blame him for everything and he wasn't going to stand for it. One Octavia. Octavia. One well, at least the prince was safe, and as the laughter and gunshots echoed behind him, he realized he was in big trouble. His daughter was gone. He cast his gaze everywhere, trying to find the owl-like teenage demon. Apart from her worried father, there was no trace of a similar demon, and then his nose caught a scent he had already perceived in his short conversation with the girl. It smelled like a mixture of embalming fluid, sulfur, old books and some kind of plants. He closed his eyes and concentrated on the smell, trying to detect it, and he caught it. It was as if he had his eyes open, even with his gaze off-scene. His other senses did a spectacular job replacing it. His ears and smell allowed him to create an almost clear image of what was happening around him. He saw the objects, the demons walking in front of him. He could even make out Blitz and the robot fighting meters behind him. And finally, the scent of Stolos's daughter. When he opened his eyes, the sensation of the scent remained. It was as if the scent of the teenager created a path in front of him, guiding him towards the girl. He glanced quickly at the owl demon who had hired them. He was terrified as he tried to find his daughter. She seemed safe, at least for now. It would be best if he brought his daughter to him before she really got desperate or something happened to her. Without wasting time, the green-haired sinner followed the path left by the teenager's scent, which led him to a funhouse whose entrance was identical to a clown's mouth. The freckled man entered the place, bumping into carousels, tubes full of constantly rotating spikes, a ruler whose seats formed hands, heavy balls that swung from one place to another. The freckled man advanced through the place, guided by the smell, passed through a door until he reached some apple-shaped seats that were constantly rotating as if it were a carousel, and in one of the seats, he found the young demon with the appearance of an owl, sitting in the fetal position while wiping the tears from her eyes. Seeing her, the expression of sin turned into a grimace of concern. In that moment, everything vanished. The fact that she was his employer, a royal demon, in that instant none of that mattered. To him, she was just a young woman who was suffering and needed someone to talk to. Certainly, his mentality had changed too much since he arrived in hell, but seeing her there, so hurt and vulnerable, an instinct that the freckled man believed forgotten resurfaced in him. The desire to help. Carefully, he sat next to the young woman, watching her silently, while he waited for her to start the conversation. One, what do you want? One, the young woman asked as she wiped some tears from her eyes. One, are you okay? Only a stupid question. Yes, it was, but the freckled man had no experience comforting women. In fact, now that he thought about it, he had no experience talking to women either. One, what kind of fucking question is that? One SHE shouted angrily, surprising the green-haired man with her abrupt attitude. One, my life is shit. My parents hate each other and my dad flirts with some redhead jerk all the time. He might abandon me. My whole world is falling apart. One, the woman said as more tears came out of her eyes and ran all over her face. Unsure of what to say to reassure the young girl beside him, he reached out to her for a moment, holding her hand away from his back. Unsure if physical contact was a good idea, he finally settled, slinging his arm around the girl's shoulders. Upon feeling his arm, she suddenly darted towards him, holding his arms while using his chest to cry. Slightly uncomfortable by the situation, the green-haired man began patting the girl's back in an attempt to comfort her. One finally gathering the courage to speak to him. I can't even begin to imagine what you're going through, but I don't believe for 1 second that your father wants to abandon you. The freckled man said, attracting the girl's attention, who separated her face from his chest and looked him straight in the eyes with a tearful look. "One, I should see it now. I'm sure he's just a couple of minutes away from destroying the entire park to find you." One, the freckled man explained, although the young woman's mood didn't seem to show any signs of improving. "One, parents sometimes do stupid things without really realizing that they hurt us." One, the memory of his mother apologizing to him all those years ago when he asked if he could be a hero was still fresh in his mind. "One, your dad may be a piece of shit, but he cares about you, even planning this whole trip to the amusement park because he wanted to spend time with you." One, the freckled man told him. With those last words, the teenage demon finally separated from the green-haired man, looking at him more calmly this time. One, maybe he's right on. After saying those words, she got back into the fetal position, holding her legs tightly. "One, I just want to go home, but my house doesn't feel like home anymore." One, the girl said with her head down. Octavia looked down and closed his eyes. He felt himself sinking deeper and deeper into the endless abyss of his misery, and suddenly, a sudden warmth enveloped her. He opened his eyes to see the green-haired sinner taking her in a strong hug. "When everything will pass, I know that now everything feels horrible and hurts a lot, but one day, your life will find a balance, and if until then you need to talk to someone, you can call One," the freckled man said to the young woman with a smile. The girl blushed after hearing those words and seeing the green-haired boy's big smile. She raised one of her hands to move one of her bangs forward in an attempt to cover the blush. "Onette, thank you. You've done a lot for me, but I really don't know your name." One, the young woman said as she cast fleeting glances at the freckled man, keeping her gaze down to maintain the expression she had in those hidden moments. The freckled man showed an even more animated smile when he saw that the girl already seemed better. "One, my name is Izuku Midoriya." One, the freckled man replied. "One, Izuku. One, the girl said, a small smile momentarily replacing her usually frowning grimace. Now that the situation seemed to have calmed down, the freckled man stood up, offering his hands to Octavia to help her get off the ride. "One, we better get back. I wasn't kidding about your dad looking ready to destroy the whole place." One, with a giggle. Octavia took the boy's hand and got off the apple-shaped chair, moving towards the exit. "One, Octavia." One, her father screamed as he saw her coming out of the funhouse, running towards her and hugging her with all his strength. "I'm so sorry, Via. I should never have brought you to this place. I just wanted to do something fun together." One, his father apologized. Unlike her attitude a few moments ago, the young woman listened to her father. "Oh, it's okay, Dad." One, the young woman said calmly. One, besides, this wasn't a total waste of time. One, with that last comment, a blush appeared on her cheeks as she ran her hand through one of her strands, tucking it behind her ear. Luckily for the freckled man, Stolas did not notice this strange behavior in his daughter. "One, holy shit." One, the freckled man exclaimed as he saw all of Lulu Land on fire, while Moxie rode some kind of giant monster bird that threw the clown robot into the air before swallowing it in one bite. One, how the hell did they manage to set everything on fire in 5 minutes? One, the desperate freckled man shouted before addressing the two members of the royal family. "O'Neil, go make sure they don't die. It was a pleasure talking to you, Octavia." One, and as he waved goodbye, the freckled man spread his wings and flew towards his fellow imp members. From the ground, the youngest member of the Goetia family watched the green-haired man with a big smile as he flew away at high speed. One, likewise, Izuku Onehe commented in a low voice. "I really don't think it's necessary." Oni, a certain freckled man with a draconic appearance, commented to the rest of his group as they looked at some outfits in a clothing store in Imp City. The rest of his imp teammates were standing in front of him, grabbing multiple sets of clothes which they were throwing into the already huge pile of clothes the freckled man was holding on his shoulders. "One, we are a company of child hitmen. We must show a good image to the clients." One, his boss explained as he looked at a rather elegant black jacket and added it to the pile of clothes. Beside him, Millie tossed a leather jacket onto the pile of clothes before adding her opinion. "Also, honey, no offense, but your high school look is already very worn out," the demon explained as she showed her husband a tight, feminine leather suit that was clearly meant for her. The freckled man looked down at himself. He was still wearing his black Oradera high school uniform, which he had dyed in. The uniform was riddled with holes and patches he had patched up unskillfully, leaving it barely covered and in very poor condition. "They're right." When I commented in a low voice as I looked at his clothes. "Onim always right, kid." One Blitz responded with a smug smile and pointed his hand directly at the locker room. One, now get dressed. We're not leaving here until you have something decent to wear. Ona's boss shouted, sending the Japanese teenager to try on the clothes. For the next hour and a half, the freckled man tried on all sorts of outfits, from one that looked quite similar to Blitz's, which was applauded by his boss with 2 thumbs up and a cheerful smile, to a black leather suit that Millie seemed to like, although she personally didn't like the tight leather feel on her body that much. Once he'd changed again for what felt like the 50th time he'd repeated the process, he took a moment to sit and think about what he was doing. He was thankful for his friends. He still wasn't sure if he could call them that. He hadn't had any friends in a long time. Well, in any case, he was thankful to them for caring and bringing him here so he could get something more decent to wear. But none of the outfits they'd brought him were to his liking. Those things just weren't his style. The worst thing was that even if he tried to think of what style of clothes he wanted to wear, the stupid desires from the time when he wanted to be a hero came back to his mind, with his silly drawings in his analysis notebooks where he tried to portray the suit that he planned to wear when he became a real hero. It would be too stupid to wear something like that, especially since it would be really uncomfortable for his work as an assassin and his new body was no longer suitable for most of those outfits. She needed something practical that she would also enjoy wearing, but none of the outfits that had been chosen for her met those requirements. She looked to the side, noticing a pair of pants that she liked despite the fact that the upper part of the outfit seemed uncomfortable. An idea occurred to her. She didn't have to dress exactly like the outfits that her classmates had chosen for her. This was fucking hell, and if there was one thing her classmates at I.M.P had been taught, it was that here you could do whatever you wanted, and if someone didn't like it, they could go fuck themselves. He smiled excitedly. Now he had a new idea. Waiting outside the locker room, Blitz, accompanied by the devil husband and wife and their hellhound, waited for the freckled man to finish changing. One shit, this kid is taking too long. One Blitz commented, quite irritated while tapping the edge of his seat with his finger. Next to him, Luna ignored him in favor of looking at her phone while Millie responded with a smile. One, calm down Blitz, these things take time. One, the devil replied, quite understanding of the newest member of I.M.P. In response to his employee's words, Blitz sighed in annoyance as he leaned on his fist. One, you're not looking for a fucking cure for cancer. How hard can it be to choose an outfit, especially with the amazing options it provides? One, clearly, patience was not one of his boss's strong suits. Hearing those words, Moxie gave her boss an annoyed look. One, wonderful options? He simply gave her an identical set to hers but in a larger size. One, the devil replied. His boss gave him an annoyed look before answering. One, yeah? There's nothing better than that. Anything's better than your stupid piece of shit bow tie suit. Onahe responded, perhaps a little aggressively, causing the annoyance of his employee. While the only 2 women in the company simply ignored the interaction of those 2, they were already quite used to this happening. Before the devil with the bow could respond to his boss's provocations, the door to the locker room where the freckled man was located opened. One, not bad at all, one, Luna commented with a small smile, looking up from her phone briefly. The chest was dressed with baggy green military-style pants, large brown boots, and a white sleeveless t-shirt, something simple but quite practical, giving him a wide range of mobility, which was useful in his work. Onite's not exactly what I would use, but I guess it's okay. Ona's boss responded simply. At his side, Millie animated cheerfully. One, you look good, Izuku. One, the little devil said with a tender smile. The freckled man felt a little nervous. He was not yet used to receiving so many compliments. One, okay. Now we can finally get to the interesting stuff. Ona's boss said with a huge smile after getting everyone's attention with loud applause. His words baffled Freckled. Hadn't they come here just to buy him a new set of clothes? Blitz led him to another section of the store, one that sold other types of products. One, weapons? Onahe asked in bewilderment. His boss had led them to a part of the store covered to the ceiling by all kinds of firearms and melee weapons, including all kinds of ammunition. One, you know I don't really need them, right? My whole body is practically a deadly weapon. One, and it was no exaggeration. Between its special breath, its sharp claws, its tail that turned into a poisonous snake, its dangerous jaws and its armored skin, it was the perfect killing machine. His boss responded with a smile as he checked out a white revolver with gold details and multiple modifications that gave it a great appearance. One, kid, what you should learn from this business is that a good killer must be good at killing with everything around him, but he must always have a trusted weapon. It's his trademark. For example, Millie has her axe, I have my pistols and Moxie his rifle. One the founder of I.M.P explained. Despite how ridiculous his statement might sound, for some reason the freckled man took it seriously. One, and which weapon should I choose? Onohe asked his companions as he looked at some weapons located on the many shelves that surrounded them. One, we can't tell you that. You have to find what works for you. One, the kind little devil answered her. Following Millie's advice, the freckled man looked at the weapons in the place, occasionally picking one up to try them out. He had tried Glock pistols, revolvers, rifles, machine guns, crossbows, even axes and knives, but none of these things felt right. I sighed in annoyance. This was a lot more complicated than I expected. I really had no idea what to choose. I'd never used a gun before, so I wasn't really familiar with any of the wide and varied options. Just as he was about to give up, something finally caught his eye. It was a weapon much larger than the others on display, but due to its now larger size, it fit him perfectly. He took it in his arms and held it tightly, analyzing it carefully. "Oh, it's a beautiful piece." When a voice caught his attention, he hadn't realized that a store employee had approached him upon seeing him interested in this weapon. Ignoring the store clerk, he returned his attention to the gun in his hands. "One, it looks like a good weapon. What can you tell me about it?" Onohe asked the little devil. "What prominent?" In response, Onohe has a great eye, sir. What he's holding in his hands is an M134 minigun with 6 rotating barrels, 7,062 by 51mm caliber bullets, and a firing capacity of 6,000 rounds per minute. He explained as he watched the freckled man analyze the weapon carefully. "I want to try it," he asked the little devil, smiling happily. The store employee took him to a shooting range filled with metal figures with slightly humanoid shapes located a few meters away from them. The store imp taught the freckled man how to load the weapon, and once it was ready, the freckled man opened fire on the metal figures. In an instant, the metal figure was riddled with hundreds of high-caliber bullets, piercing through the metal surface and opening a few holes in the brick wall behind it. It had barely maintained continuous fire for a minute and had already shattered solid metal. "One, I love Haranehe," told the little devil, which made his smile even wider at having made a sale. "One great decision, sir. Is there anything else to wish for?" One, the minigun was cool and all, but it wouldn't be very practical in stealth missions or enclosed areas. I needed another weapon, something more portable with great destructive power and maybe some explosives with versatile capabilities. "One, I want to see the handguns and explosives on E," asked the devil, who responded with a big smile. After a couple of hours choosing his new accessories, the chest was dressed with all his new equipment. His M134 minigun was in a large holster located on his back, right in the space between his wings. His new handguns, 2 Smith & Wesson Model 500, modified with space for 10 expanding bullets in its easily reloadable magazine, both in 2 holsters on the sides of his waist, a belt that crossed his chest covered in explosive discs based on thermite, and to finish the set, he had many pockets in the belt of his pants where he kept extra ammunition for all his weapons. All the weapons he carried along with his new suit gave him the appearance of being a soldier, or at least a former military man who now operated as a mercenary, truly a big change compared to how he looked just a few years before. After their day of shopping, the I.M.P team found themselves in the company van, returning to the company building, listening to the radio playing loudly. "1 I love this song," when his boss said very animatedly while trying to follow the lyrics of the song. 1 was an ideal, blonde demon, hungry for semen and sensual look. No doubt the songs down here were in line with the mentality of the demons. The truck advanced at high speed towards the parking lot next to the company building, dragging its tires as it entered the building's parking lot due to the high speed at which they were moving. Suddenly, when they were about to enter their parking lot, a pink car sped up and took their space. "One, fuck it. Damn it." Onohe's boss screamed as he desperately began to swerve his steering wheel to the opposite side in an attempt to avoid crashing into the pink convertible that had taken his space. Luckily, his boss managed to stop before they crashed. 1 But what kind of bitch came up with that? Her annoying boss grabbed a megaphone and stuck his head out the window to yell at the people in the pink convertible. Attention. Whoever has that pink semen-colored jalopy. You have 3 fucking seconds to vacate my only free parking space. Her irate boss shouted through the megaphone before realizing who the person was that got out of the convertible, a little devil with bright pink skin, long white hair, sharp horns, heart-shaped sunglasses and a tight black and white short dress, who was chewing gum while looking at her boss with cold indifference. 1 Shit. Verosika. Onaha's boss seemed really surprised by the presence of that stranger. One Blitzo one the woman responded when she saw her boss with obvious annoyance. The tension between the two was clear. When I should have known you were coming, I could smell the fish from here, which is weird since the nearest ocean is. Onahe paused as he left the van through the window, crashing face first into the ground. 3 kingdoms down. One getting back up as if nothing had happened to continue yelling at the woman whose identity was completely unknown to the freckled Minone, and I should have known you'd be here when I heard there was a stalker on the loose. The woman replied while holding a bottle of alcohol in her hand. Onim surprised they let you out of rehab. I see you're still a drunken whore, because you still carry alcohol around like it's the last straw in hell. Ignoring the insult. The demon tossed her white hair. They let me out because I'm famous, besides, that place is for idiots and losers. Onahe paused as he took a sip from his bottle of alcohol. Your sister sends you greetings, the woman said as she wiped a drop of alcohol that dripped from her lips. Blitz approached the woman while pointing his finger at her threateningly. Why leave your car here? This is the only place my company has, so take that vehicle tampon somewhere else. The woman bent down to Blitz's height. In fact, useless. My name is Hera. Onahe pointed to the floor where the name I.M.P was crossed out and replaced by the word Verosika, in huge fluorescent pink letters. I do freelance work for another, more successful company in the building. I'll be staying this week to help you during your vacation. The pop star responded. On week. No, don't even think you'll stay a week. Verosika leaned towards her boss, the aura of anger surrounding her suddenly growing more intense. What happened, Blitzo? You're going to run away and leave someone else paying for that hotel, you're going to steal his car, circle his house 3 times and blow my credit card on some fucking pony riding lessons. It was becoming increasingly difficult for the freckled man to follow the thread of this conversation. Good heavens, bitch, you're so spiteful. The demonic pop star gave her boss the middle finger before walking past her. Suck a dick with Thornton. The demon passed by her truck. She saw Luna hide in the presence of the succubus. She had never seen the hellhound behave like that. That demon must be really important down here. Without a doubt he still had many things to learn from hell. Blitzo walked behind Verosika. Wait, you have to move your damn car or else. A huge figure advanced behind both of them. It was a hellhound, the same species as Luna, but this one was much bigger, stockier, and due to the scar that crossed one of its eyes, much more threatening. Or else, what? Maybe it was time to intervene. The last thing he needed was for his boss to get hurt, not be able to work today and have his day docked. So he got out of the company car, standing menacingly behind the imposing, burly hellhound. There is some problem. The demon dog turned around, staring straight into the freckled man's emerald eyes without showing the slightest sign of fear. Both were of considerable height, although the freckled one was half a head taller than the hound demon. Both demons with an imposing aura stared at each other, engaging in a silent stare fight. Seeing the arrival of the freckled one, Blitz bellowed smugly, "Onahe, your piece of shit dog isn't going to defend you. Now move your piece of shit." The succubus glanced at her ex-boyfriend's largest and most imposing employee. It seemed like Blitzo really had a good hire. That guy could probably give Vortex a good fight, but luckily, she knew how to deal with guys like these. Ignoring her ex, who was looking at her with a haughty smile, the pink-skinned demon walked past him and his bodyguard, approaching the green-haired demon. Wow, who would have thought Blitzo would hire someone so big? Well, this was starting to make the freckled boy nervous. The attractive figure demon ran one of her fingers down the freckled boy's chest while she pressed her body against his and stood on tiptoes to bring her lips close to one of the freckled boy's pointy ears. If you behave, I can give you a fun time. The freckled man shuddered, unable to stand his ground against the flirting of the attractive demon. Izuku Midoriya was many things, most of which had changed after his relatively short stay in hell, but despite everything he had lived and experienced in this time, there were some things that had not changed, such as, he was a nerd with almost no experience with the opposite sex. In fact, his most interactions with women had been with Millie and his brief conversation and text messages with Octavia. His inexperienced, pubescent mind was unable to process the woman's flirting. The only reason those present didn't see her face completely flushed was because of the scales covering her skin. I jumped back, distancing myself from the sex demon, throwing an apologetic look at Blitz before turning back towards the van. "One'll wait in the car." The freckled man responded, leaving his boss with his mouth open before taking refuge behind the truck, causing his boss's ex to smile. Seeing that she had succeeded in getting rid of the huge sinner, the succubus showed the imp a haughty smile, ignoring him and moving towards the building. Vamonos Vortex 1. He ordered the Hellhound to serve his bodyguard, who obeyed, advancing towards the building behind his boss. Goodbye, Dick Suckerone. The woman said goodbye while giving the middle finger to the imp. His boss lowered his head in annoyance. I wasted a lot of time with that bag of women. The crestfallen devil complained, only to be interrupted when Luna yelled from the passenger seat in the company car. Do you know Verosika maiden? It was rare to see the Hellhound scream like that. She was usually indifferent to everything around her except for her cell phone. What? Oh, yeah, her, we're leaving. Onh's boss responded indifferently. Was that before or after you became a pop star? Millie asked. You dated a pop star? Moxie screamed in bewilderment. Are there pop stars in the underworld? The freckled man asked. He really should get out of the office more. Blitz became irritated with the constant questions from his employees. Okay, why act like you're surprised? Onh's annoying boss asked. Hello, this is Verosika maiden. The Hellhound responded as if the answer was obvious. With you. Millie followed her receptionist's response. I don't. Is she blind? Or does she have some kind of brain damage? Moxie asked. Their boss looked at them irritably. They are making this much more serious than it is. I don't get involved in their stupid personal affairs. After that statement, complaints from his employees were not long in coming. You do that all the time, sir. I speak Moxie. If you do eat. Millie replied. Of course. Luna Sadone. There is a camera in the office room where I sleep and I'm pretty sure it wasn't there when I moved in. The freckled man did his part, speaking at the same time as the rest of his companions. His boss slapped his face, clearly intending to leave this conversation. Okay, forget it. Looney, Moxie, kid, come with me. Millie, where are you looking to park the car? Onehe shouted as he threw the keys to the devil. The 3 imp members followed their boss into the building, reaching his office via the floor elevator. Do you think they saw me? My makeup looks horrible today. Luna complained, quite worried. No, you look great, Looney. As always. Her boss kindly told his adopted daughter Oni shut up. Luna stopped her sentence when she saw Blitz get too close, with his eyes shining as he unconsciously almost said, "Dad," to her. Blitzo. He quickly corrected himself before saying something embarrassing. Ignoring the little devil, Luna continued walking while starting to look at herself in the mirror, causing her to accidentally bump into her boss's ex's Hellhound bodyguard, which seemed to rekindle the flame of anger in her boss. Wow, that's great, big guy. Where's your boss's dog? Blitz asked. The huge Hellhound was not bothered by his boss's behavior. Onate's there, said the big Hellhound, pointing to the office right in front of Hisone. There was no room on the 4th floor, so they rented an apartment here. It was clear that his boss was not happy with that. Come on. In response to his boss's frustrated shout, the succubus's bodyguard was simply stimulatingly amused. Sorry friend. Onehe apologized before walking away to the other side of the aisle. Seeing how furious his boss was, Moxie stepped forward. Onesir, why won't you let me talk to them? Since I don't listen to pop music, their status doesn't matter to me. Despite his attempt to help, the imp leader seemed to react to being kind at these moments. Moxie, shut the fuck up. Following his boss's order, the imp like yes sir. I walked towards the office the pop star had rented, in an attempt to talk to them. From the outside, the freckled man saw the succubi throwing themselves at his bun-wearing companion while he tried in vain to talk to them. Moxie. Don't let them touch any of your holes. The freckled man turned around. He really didn't want to see Moxie in what appeared to be a sexual attack by a group of succubi. He turned around to see one side of the hallway, watching the large Hellhound who worked as Verosika's bodyguard. Hey, regarding what happened in the parking lot, no hard feelings, you know how this job is. Onehe had nothing against the Hellhound and really didn't want to get into trouble with anyone yet. The hound sounds completely calm to him. Yes, don't worry about that. Onia very friendly guy apparently. The black-furred hellhound extending his hand towards him to greet Himo. Nice to meet you, I'm Vortex. One I greet you in a friendly manner. On Izukuon, the draconic freckled man replied, taking her hand in a titanesso. How did a sinner end up as an I.M.P employee? Onehe asked curiously. Izuku stood beside him, leaning against the wall to one side to talk quietly, completely ignoring what was happening between his boss and the group of succubi in the offices next door. Onight's something that just happened, you know? I had just died, Blitz found me, offered me a job, and it turns out I'm really good at this. One, it felt good to have a casual chat. I hadn't had one since. In fact, I couldn't remember the last time I had just talked to someone without worrying about anything. Aneha. Looks like you weren't lucky. Who would have thought that little devil was my boss's ex? I hadn't seen her so upset in a long time. One, that was surprising. One, seriously? I didn't really think she'd be annoying. She looked more like she enjoyed annoying him. Oneha's comment got another laugh out of the black-furred hellhound. 1OH, yes, he enjoys it, but he also doesn't like in the least having to spend a week near him. One, Blitz must have really done something really bad to anger that woman so much. Judging by the way they interacted in the parking lot, it was clear they hated each other a lot. They both watched Moxie being thrown out of the succubus office covered in lipstick marks and other things she preferred not to name. It was a good thing Millie wasn't here now. She had no doubt that the little devil would kill everyone involved after seeing her husband in that condition. 1OH, that's all. One, the sinner's boss shouts before entering the office with a really irritated look on his face. Seeing his boss's actions, the big-headed man was unable to suppress a sigh full of irritation. One, it seems like he's going to do something really stupid. Only a second later, Blitz left the office. One, everyone to the boardroom. We have a competition to win. One, well, it looked like this was going to be a long day. One, bad luck friend. One, Vortex said with an amused smile as he patted the freckled boy on the back. One, the worst part is that Blitz doesn't pay overtime. One, the green-haired man's comment brings a smile to the black-furred hellhound's face. One, you may work for an idiot, but you're actually a really nice person. One, the hellhound showed his phone to the sinner. One, you seem like a fun guy. Give me your number. I'll text you when this madness is over. One, with the proposition of the succubus's bodyguard, the freckled man smiling brightly before giving him his phone number. It was really strange how he was happier with his life in hell than with his life as a human. One, okay. Shut your asses, this is what we're going to do. One, Blitz shouted as he showed some poorly drawn drawings that attempted to represent all the I.M.P members. One, first, we find a huge crowd of customers, we cross the portal, we have fun killing as usual, we pile all the bodies into an incredible giant canoe, we take the canoe out to open water, we set it on fire to attract sharks and eagles, and that, if the geese come too, what does it matter? They eat the bodies, we win the bet, and we show it off in front of that drunken bastard whore. One, it didn't take a genius to realize that his boss hadn't thought it through before challenging his ex. One, so, any questions? One, many, but it seems he wouldn't be the first to express his doubts. His bun-wearing partner was visibly annoyed by the weak excuse for a plan his boss had come up with. One, yes, what was all that? One, the devil with the bun asked. One, that wasn't a question. One, that was not a plan. One, sorry, but that was an amazing presentation about what we're going to do. Moxie, it's not my fault that your brain is so soft-toned. That didn't make sense. How soft? Onim insulting you. Learn how to take criticism, you little dick baby. Onah's boss yelled as he poked Moxie's chest with the tip of his finger. Moxie stood on the table and pointed at her boss's chest with growing anger. One, how about taking drawing classes? Onah's words only made his boss even more upset. One, and what if you check how expensive they are? One, Blitz yelled as he grabbed Moxie by the bun and roughly threw him against his chair. The freckled one simply watched the duo of imps argue with each other. At this point he had gotten used to this kind of thing. One, do we really have to do this? Onah's words full of disinterest caught the attention of the room, causing both devils to leave their fight aside at least for the moment. Onight's just a parking space, no big deal. Onahe commented distractedly while waving his hand. His boss focused all his attention on the freckled man after saying those words, making the huge sinner a little nervous. One, just one parking space? Just one fucking parking space? Onahe jumped onto the conference table and started walking towards the chest with heavy footsteps, noticeably enraged. One, listen to me carefully, child. One, I grabbed the collar of Izuku's shirt, pulling it hard until their eyes are facing each other. This isn't about a fucking parking space. It's about pride. I won't let that bitch take whatever she wants without a fight. It's a matter of childish principles. Besides, I don't care about your opinion. I'm your fucking boss and you'll do what I say. Understood? In response, the freckled man pacing frantically. He may be much stronger than his boss, but in this short time he had seen what the imps in front of him could do, so he was pretty sure he didn't want to anger any of them. GU done with that settled. Blitz returned to the front of the office, ready to continue explaining his plan. Would it be possible for me to accompany you this time? Only to be interrupted again by Luna, who had surprisingly taken her attention off her phone to talk to her boss, something very rare for the Hellhound. Her boss wasted no time in denying her adopted daughter's request. Absolutely not. I forbid it and it's not going to happen. Sorry, honey. That place isn't suitable for vulnerable young goth girls. You have no idea how many weirdos there are. Lunatics who would drool just looking at you. Everyone in the office looked away, staring into space, directly into the eyes of anyone who might be watching, or reading, what was happening in the office. Returning to her business after that brief moment, Luna continued trying to convince her adoptive father I could blend in with the humans, let me keep you company. Onahe's words caught the attention of everyone present. Wait, repeat that. Onahe asked his adoptive father can I blend in? Onahe repeated do you have a human costume? Millie asked yes, don't you? The three imps and the sinner looked at each other with blank stares. The four of them have been causing a scene all this time, without using human disguises. The teenager screamed. Well, to be fair, with gifts many humans don't exactly look human. The freckled man tried to defend himself. Blitz took a new sheet of paper and hurriedly made a new drawing. Okay, new plan. Looney will take the humans with us, so what can we do? Her boss explained with a smile as he showed a poorly drawn drawing of Luna surrounded by humans. Well, what do you think? I asked. Millie with her usual cheerful attitude supported her boss with his plan. It sounds logical. Unlike her husband seemed more skeptical. I think you're forgetting something, sir. You need a client who orders enough to win the bet. We're not going to kill for no reason. I refute the devil. His boss responded with a smile, acting calmly. Calm down Mox, I've got that sorted. Onahe responded calmly. The group was outside the imp offices, where their boss had posted a handmade poster on a nearby lamppost promising a 50% discount to future customers. And now, to wait it was hard to imagine that being effective. There is no way a badly drawn poster can be. Moxie couldn't even finish complaining when a long line of interested customers gathered in front of the sign. In response to the impressive effectiveness of the sign, Blitz snorted before walking to the group of new customers. Okay. Who goes first? Onahe's smug grin was a testament to how much he'd enjoyed making Moxie wrong. After taking orders from all their clients, the group met in the human world, under a pier on a beach in New Orleans. Fortunately for them, most of the orders were gathered on or near this beach, due to a concert that was about to start there soon, making their work considerably easier. They watched the humans partying on the beach from behind a pile of trash under the pier. Okay. Remember, they can't see us. If anything goes wrong, there'll be panic. Luna will lead the targets to a better place to kill them. You already have the list. Looney. The group's secretary took a long piece of paper with the names of the targets, sniffing briefly. I have Itone the Hellhound said before leaving her hiding place, activating her human disguise. The real appearance of his secretary was replaced by the form of a human teenager with light skin, red eyes and white hair, giving the appearance of a gothic girl. Looney, you look so horrible. I'm so proud. Now go. Onahe's boss said as he smiled widely and wiped away a tear of emotion. It was curious how human disguises were actually necessary, considering that thanks to quirks there were people with appearances that didn't differ much from those that could be found in hell, although he supposed that having a disguise wouldn't hurt for his jobs that required more care, maybe he should get one. Ignoring those thoughts for the moment, her boss's adopted daughter advanced towards the celebrating teenagers unaware of the danger they were in. Her first target was a young man with a mutation quirk that made him look like a huge, really burly bipedal bear. When Luna caught up with him, she signaled to him inviting him to accompany her to a nearby alley. As they reached the dark alley, The massive bear-like teenager approached Luna with notoriously lustful intentions. Izuku stepped out from the shadows of the alley, extending one of his retractable claws and using it to slit the bear-mutated teenager's throat, causing him to fall to the ground, choking on his own blood. The two demonic teenagers who were still alive seemed indifferent to the boy's agonizing death. The freckled one simply gave the secretary a smile accompanied by a thumbs up before hiding back in the shadows. Using this strategy, the group of hitmen murdered dozens of teenagers in a matter of minutes, hanging them, beating them, shooting them and eliminating them in every imaginable way, ending up with a large number of garbage bags full of corpses. MHA. Let's see if that slut can reach orgasm more times than this. Onaha's boss said, smiling as he shoved more human remains into a clearly already overflowing bag. Suddenly, the stage lit up. Pink smoke began to cover it while lights of the same color appeared. The screens on the sides lit up. All right, young people, are you ready to get drunk and make bad decisions? Oni, a very familiar figure, appeared on the stage. It was her boss's ex, Verosika. Although now she was wearing a human disguise, you didn't have to be a genius to recognize her. The crowd of teenagers screamed quite excitedly in response. Apparently she was as much a celebrity in the world of the living as in hell. "One, this is your last call, all aboard." One, the succubus said as she walked to the other side of the stage, at the same time that the stadium screens showed the message, "Fuck you, Blitzo," which angered her boss quite a bit. As the succubus sang, the young men in the audience began to get noticeably aroused, throwing themselves at each other without any shame at being in a crowded public place. They had to admit it. That woman knew what she was doing. They were at a clear disadvantage. That bitch is invoking a diabolical sexual calling. Now he'll be surrounded by nymphomaniacs. We have to hurry. Should we kill this loony? Onahe asked while pointing at a teenager vomiting right in front of him. 1OH. Yes, I think so. 1SHE didn't seem very sure. In fact, her attention seemed to be directed at the stage. 1 good. 1, although that didn't seem to matter to his boss, who took an axe. 1, hey, what kind of quirk do you have? A weird elf quirk? 1, the boy asked, letting out an amused laugh at the end before Blitz split his skull in two with his axe. 1, yes, very funny, but now you're not going to tell anyone. 1, with the boy dead, Blitz turned again to his adopted daughter. All right, loony, who's next? Onahe asked, but his secretary was no longer there. 1 Monday? Onahe started looking for her with his eyes, getting quite worried quickly. 1, where's my baby? 1, very desperate scream. 1, look. 1, Millie pointed at him, pointing directly at Luna, who was walking through the crowd towards the stage, to which Blitz growled in rage before running after her. Izuku and the company's husband and wife watched him walk away in silence. 1, something tells me it won't be of much use the rest of the day. 1, the freckled man commented before letting out an annoyed sigh, which was shared by Moxie. 1. Well, does anyone have anything to do with the work? His bun-wearing partner replied. The freckled man who was holding the list in his hands tore it in two before giving a piece of it to the imps. 1, take care of this part, I'll do the rest. 1, the three nodded before separating to each begin their work. A simple-looking young man wearing a blue one-piece suit decorated with a golden disc in the center strolled calmly around the beach. He was a young hero working under the pseudonym Energy Disc. As a simple sidekick, his boss had ordered him to protect the beach concert from any villain who might try something. It was somewhat annoying to simply walk around the place watching the teenagers party. In the short time that he had been there, he had seen at least 20 couples having sex in the middle of the beach, in full view of everyone. If it weren't for the fact that he was also that age once, he would have arrested them all for public indecency. But hey, it was a Verosika concert, what else could he expect? He didn't know how or why, but it was as if the simple singing of that woman excited everyone. Could it be a quirk? Who knows, but until they told him that the singer was doing something illegal, he had no reason to mess with her. Ignoring her thoughts on the subject, she chose to simply continue with her work. Her new boss was very demanding, and if she wanted to impress her, she would have to make sure she didn't screw things up. 1AH. Onahe stopped his rounds when he heard a scream. It had been mild at best, and at this kind of concert it could be anything. But his instinct told him it could be something dangerous. He wouldn't waste much time. He'd just take a look. If he was wrong, at worst he'd just interrupt a couple of horny teenagers. He carefully entered the alley from which he had heard the scream. Stopping at the corner, he peeked out to see what was happening, only to be shocked to see a scene that was not at all what he expected. I was standing in front of a homicide scene. A teenager dressed only in a bathing suit was lying on his back on the floor with 4 claw-like cuts crossing his stomach. The boy was breathing heavily, desperately clinging to life. Standing next to him, the murderer watched the dying boy with absolute indifference. One shit, I hate it when they fight. The assassin complained as he flapped the 2 enormous wings on his back, causing a bunch of pebbles to fall from them, scattering all over the alley. A more careful analysis allowed him to realize the damage that was on the floor and walls of the alley. It seemed that the boy had some kind of gift to control the earth that he had used in a desperate attempt to save his life. Well, we're done with this. The attacker said before drawing one of his pistols and pointing it directly at the teenager's face. Energy Disc immediately activated his quirk. Despite his injuries, there was still a chance that the boy could survive. A yellow energy disc appeared in his hand before he threw it towards the villain. The disc spun like a frisbee, hitting the gun and deflecting the barrel just as it fired, causing the bullet to crash a few inches from the teen's head. I curse everything. Now what? Onahe shouted as he turned his gaze towards the hero who had adopted a fighting pose in the corner. Who the fuck are you? The villain asked. The young hero didn't say a word. He simply created more discs which he began to throw at the villain with a draconic body. These discs spun much faster. Their speed could be compared to electric saws, which, despite the fact that they could cut a tree with ease, bounced off the villain's scaly skin. Okay. Now you made me angry. The boy drew his 2 pistols and opened fire mercilessly at him. He created a much larger disc, which he used as a shield, successfully keeping the bullets out. Suddenly the villain sheathed his weapons and jumped to the top of the alley, climbing onto one of the surrounding rooftops and disappearing from sight. Creating more floating discs, he positioned them in front of him to use them as platforms and climbed to the roof in pursuit of the villain, which proved to be a very bad idea since as soon as the hero set foot on the roof, he saw the villain grinning maniacally while holding a damn minigun. Say goodbye and without further ado he opened fire. The 6 rotating cannons fired a barrage of bullets at the young hero. He tried to create a disc to protect himself from the attack, which worked for a moment. It stopped the first few hundred bullets, but the joy didn't last long as the disc started to crack. It was taking too much damage, which made keeping the shield active really tiring. He couldn't keep it up for much longer. Please. I don't want to die, SHE pleaded, but couldn't find the slightest hint of empathy in her attacker's eyes. Finally, the disc broke. Hundreds of high-caliber bullets pierced his body, completely shattering it and killing him instantly. Only after his body was reduced to a mass of blood, bones and unrecognizable organs did his chest finally stop firing. Wow, shit yeah. I was eager to try this thing. Satisfied with the results of his new weapons, the freckled man put the minigun back in the large holster he carried in the middle of his back. Now I just have to finish the list and I'll finally have my well-deserved rest. Onahe couldn't wait, he just had to kill a few more people and they could finally go home. But before he could continue killing, a loud roar interrupted him. He looked at the beach, where a huge monster fish was attacking everything that moved. Damn, this can't be our fault, right? I really had a bad feeling about this whole thing. Blitz stared in amazement at the enormous monster fish that had emerged from the ocean, which had grabbed Moxie with its tongue and apparently devoured him. His employee with the bow tie could possibly have defended himself if he weren't so clearly drunk. Millie, his most lethal employee, possibly second only to the boy, made a homemade Molotov cocktail which she threw at the monster fish, which retreated into the ocean and swam fearlessly until she climbed onto its immense, scaly body. The little devil reached into the fish's mouth, opening its jaw with her legs and pulling out Moxie, who had somehow not been digested. It was then that a huge shadow rose above them, flying directly towards where the pair of imps were, the only sinner in their group of murderers. The freckled one flew over the mouth of the monster fish, approaching the pair of imps and Millie, Moxie, subs. Millie immediately climbed onto the freckled man's back, dragging her drunken husband behind her, both of whom sat on the freckled man's back, holding onto his minigun holster. Now that his co-workers were safe, the chesty one turned his attention to the large monster, began to take air and his throat lit up an intense white, a sign that he was about to use one of his special breaths, although the color of his throat did not match the red that appeared when he threw fire or the yellow that meant lightning. As he released his breath, a white light shot out, completely ignoring the monster fish and hitting the water it was in. Upon contact with the freckled man's breath, the water surrounding the monster instantly froze, preventing the enormous creature from moving. With the target immobilized, the freckled man pulled his minigun out of its holster again and aimed at the creature. The bullets completely destroyed the monster, filling its body with holes that ended its life in a short time, leaving behind its body sticking out of the ice. With that matter over, the freckled man flew calmly back to his boss. Upon landing, Millie jumped elegantly from his back while Moxie fell on his face. "One, please tell me we had nothing to do with the monster fish." One, the freckled man told his boss the moment they were in front of each other. One, how do you think we were able to do that shit? On's boss's response was somewhat reassuring, although it raised the question, if they had nothing to do with it, where did that thing come from? There was a possibility that it was an animal with a quirk, but it seemed unlikely that it would emerge just when they were here. One, well, I found this in one of his teeth. Millie commented as she took out a kind of metal canteen that the freckled man took to sniff it with his extremely sensitive nose. It's alcohol. Great. It really wasn't his fault. Just as they were beginning to get an idea of who was responsible for this, a voice caught the group's attention. One, Blitzo Verosika, accompanied by the rest of her group of succubi wearing human disguises, discovered behind them. Wow. But they are the bitches. On's boss shouted with noticeable annoyance in his voice. One, I think this is not from any of you. Millie commented after taking the canteen from the freckled man's hands and throwing it at the succubi's feet. Her boss's ex grimaced in irritation after catching the container of demonic alcohol in midair. One, yes. Well, you entered the human world without disguises. Onehe responded to the imps in a poor attempt to defend himself. The freckled man crossed his arms over his chest in a proud pose. One, have you seen people with mutant quirks? Thanks to them, any demon can go unnoticed up here. In fact, I think you'd do better as a singer in your succubus form. On's comment only irritated the succubus more, realizing how truly screwed she was. His boss seized the opportunity, taking a step forward towards his ex-partner. One, you know, we could keep this Godzilla scene between us if you give us, or I don't know, our parking space. One, as he said those words, his boss had the biggest shit-eating grin the freckled man had ever seen. One, aggg, good one. Having no other choice, the succubus accepts the conditions. Without wasting time, Blitz began to celebrate his victory. One, we won. On's boss shouted with remarkable intensity. One, that is. One, Millie was also quite animated. One, even the freckled one couldn't help but celebrate with his teammates. One, come on Looney, let's park our big, heavy car in our big, heavy space. On's boss shouted before opening a portal with the grimoire to his office in hell. The entire imp team jumped back into the portal as the group of succubi walked towards the beach exit, though it didn't stop Verosika from noticing her ex jumping through the portal to taunt her while flashing both middle fingers, eliciting a growl of rage from her. Just as the succubi left the beach heading towards the city, they were surrounded by dozens of heroes and police officers who were aiming at them. On all right, you sons of bitches. Hands up and butts open. Oni, a policeman shouted. Verosika watched the whole scene with great annoyance. One, okay bitches, get ready to suck a lot of pigs' dicks. One, everyone grimaced in disgust. It wouldn't be a pleasant afternoon. Heavy footsteps echoed down a white hallway as a towering figure with a serious look walked forward. It was a blonde woman wearing a hero outfit slightly resembling the American flag, the style in which her hair was slightly reminiscent of a certain Japanese hero. It was the heroine Star and Stripe, who entered a completely sterilized white room that functioned as a morgue, at least for the moment. There were dozens of tables with bodies on them. It was clear that the room was at maximum capacity, especially since the tables with corpses barely left room to move. America's #1 heroine will look with mild shock at the dozens of corpses before addressing an old man in a medical gown standing in the middle of the tables. One, I had no idea what had been so bad on the monster fish attack. That's how the media referred to the appearance of a huge sea creature that had attacked a beach in New Orleans where a concert had been taking place. No one knew where that creature had appeared from. The theory that was most talked about on national networks and news channels was that it was a fish that developed a mutant quirk that made it grow until it looked like a full-fledged monster. People believed that the monster had been inside the ocean away from everyone's sight, feeding on fish and other things. Some reporters attributed its appearance to ocean currents and the reduction of marine species due to increasing pollution. Some people on the news had put forward the theory that these problems had caused food to become scarce, causing the monster to come out to the beach in search of food. The loss of all those young lives was a true tragedy, but despite that, Star and Stripe didn't understand why they had been called to this place. The answer to her doubt came when the morgue doctor discovered one of the white blankets that covered a body on the table next to him. The eyes of the American heroine opened wide when she recognized the body that was resting on the table, or at least the remains of the suit that the corpse was wearing. One energy disc, Onehe whispered the name of his newest accomplice. As the blonde heroine kept her gaze fixed on the young hero's body, the doctor began to speak. We found him on a rooftop near the beach. I'm so sorry for your loss. She didn't even listen to the doctor's condolences. She just stood there, staring at the young man's body in front of her. I carefully analyzed the wounds on the corpse of the boy who had just left the Hero Academy. It didn't take long to realize a fact. His wounds were not from scratches or anything that sea monster could cause. They were projectile wounds, from a really powerful weapon based on the wounds. One, the monster didn't do that. One, the doctor moving forward with regret on the sea monster did not cause much damage, only leaving 4 victims in its wake, but when the heroes came to investigate they came across a very unpleasant surprise. One, the morgue doctor pointed to the dozens of bodies that filled the place. One, they were in garbage bags and some abandoned in places near the beach. The causes of death vary: gunshots, blunt force trauma, asphyxiation, cuts or stabbings. One had his head split in two. If the sea monster didn't do this, then who was responsible? One, do you have any suspects? One, the doctor shook his head. N1, although based on ballistics, it appears that the weapon that killed the monster is the same one that killed your partner. So they were the same person. The heroine peeking out. Send me everything related to the case. My agency will take care of this from now on. One, now the worst part of his job. Breaking the news of his death to the boy's family. He hated seeing the pain in the relatives when a young hero died in action. The only thing he could promise that family is that he would find the person responsible and bring the full weight of justice down on him. A portal opened in the middle of the imp offices. The group of imps and the sinner came out of the portal laughing animatedly. Their clothes were stained with blood and Millie held a severed human head in her hands, which she threw back into the portal, which closed a moment later. One, it's funny. The blood of Italian mobsters is harder to remove than that of American gangsters. One, the freckled man commented, looking at his blood-covered clothes and knowing that it would be a total pain to clean them. At his comment, Moxie nodded. She could easily understand what the freckled man was referring to. One, it may have something to do with what they eat. One, the little devil commented after letting out a sigh of annoyance. After all, he would be in charge of washing his and his wife's clothes. The freckled man entered for a moment the empty room in the middle of the office that he used as his bedroom. A couple of minutes later he came out with a new set of clean clothes. One, well, I'm leaving now, enjoy your weekend. Onehe walked quickly towards the exit of the company office. Unfortunately, his haste was not enough to avoid his boss's interrogation. One, where are you going? One, it was strange to see his only sinful employee go out. Usually it was just work and sleep. Yeah, well, I've been here for 2.5 months and I don't know much about anything down here. I was thinking about going out and getting to know the place a little. Onehe had really taken his time. His life down here was based almost entirely on work. Today he had woken up more adventurous. He wanted to go out and see the city a little. He only knew a few places in the Pride Ring, and of those few places, they were all in Imp City. He hadn't visited any other places in the ring, nor did he even know the main city, which he had only heard about from his clients and co-workers, Pentagram City, the main and largest city in the ring. From what he had heard, the largest number of sinners in hell resided in that city. Blitz had mentioned on a few occasions his desire to move the company's offices there due to the greater number of clients, but the cost of rent in the city was certainly a problem for that project, at least until the company's profits increased. In any case, I had decided to explore the largest city in the Pride Ring a bit. One, well, have a nice day. I hope you have fun. Onehe said goodbye to his co-workers before opening the office window and flying out. So, what are your plans for tonight? One, faced with his boss's question, the devil with the bow rolled his eyes in annoyance. One day he would have to do something about his boss's bullying behavior. Flying at a high altitude, the freckled man watched the buildings of Imp City shrink further and further into the distance, the suburban environment below him replaced by a barren terrain where some highways were visible. It was hard to tell exactly how long he had been flying at his top speed, but he mentally estimated that it had been between 30 and 45 minutes when he finally saw her. The lights on the horizon and blurry images of buildings had reached the capital of the Pride Ring, Pentagram City. It was a truly enormous city, and at first glance you could see why it was called the Pentagram City. After all, at the height you were at, it was impossible not to notice that the entire city was laid out in such a way that it had the shape of a gigantic pentagram, a rather interesting design. He observed the city from the air. Even at the height at which he could easily distinguish what was happening on the surface. He could see a large number of sinners fighting each other for unknown reasons. The place was full of chaos and destruction, a city of hell in its own right, although for his first visit he would prefer a quieter place. Analyzing the city carefully, he finally found a place that seemed much quieter compared to the rest of the city, so without wasting time, he landed in the middle of a quiet street where some thin people with black eyes and sharp teeth were walking around wearing Victorian clothes that looked really old. Oddly enough, it was a very pleasant environment for hell. He walked through the streets watching children playing, men selling balloons, and people talking animatedly. In fact, this place looked much calmer and safer than his hometown in the human world. As he strolled through the surprisingly pleasant streets, the freckled boy smiled brightly, wondering how such a pleasant place could exist in hell. It was then that he realized, a child walked past him with a cone of popcorn, only the cone didn't have any popcorn. It was full of severed fingers that the child consumed with sick joy. It was as if only at that moment, his eyes opened, noticing a few things that had somehow gone unnoticed until now. Small stalls selling severed body parts, a group of children devouring a corpse in the middle of an alley, and what should probably have been the first thing he noticed about this place, the sign that said, Cannibal Neighborhood. Now, it is true that in some of his jobs, he had gotten a bit excited, and had ended the lives of his victims by means of his powerful jaws, tearing out their windpipes with a bite or attacking their abdomens, but personally he had no taste for cannibalism, despite the fact that he may have swallowed some of his victims' flesh and blood during those small jobs. It was part of the job, but it was not something he did for pleasure. It was funny how even though this was a place full of cannibals, it seemed to be quite civilized compared to the rest of hell. It must have been somewhat complicated to maintain this level of control over a group of cannibals. He was thinking about that when something caught his attention, or rather someone, leaving one of the taxidermy shops that abounded in the cannibal neighborhood. A familiar face appeared. One Octavia, one the heiress of the Goetia family, turned around upon hearing her name, appearing quite surprised to see the green-haired sinner standing next to her. One Izuku, what are you doing here? One the girl asked. The freckled man just smiled calmly. One I wanted to get to know the Pentagram City a little bit, and what are you doing here? One the girl seemed a little nervous about his question. One I bought some things. Taxidermy is a hobby and this is one of the best shops in hell. Izuku nodded. For many people taxidermy might be seen as a very strange hobby, but this was hell. Strange things were an everyday thing. Besides, it's not like he was in the position to judge other people's hobbies. While he was alive he gathered everything he could find of the symbol of peace until he practically built an altar to the man he now hated with all his soul, God. He really hoped his mother had gotten rid of all of that after her death. He felt a feeling of melancholy rise in his chest, the same thing that had been happening lately when he thought about his mother. Just like the other times he had experienced that, he tried hard to suppress those feelings, storing them in the darkest and deepest corner of his mind, simply discarding them for another day. Ignoring those uncomfortable thoughts, the freckled man focused on his friend. He wasn't sure if he should consider Octavia a friend. Outside of a few messages they'd sent each other lately, their only interaction had been as a bodyguard his father had hired. After that brief exchange of words, silence reigned between them. Both were quite antisocial, so maintaining a casual conversation was not something that was among their skills. One you know, there's a good coffee shop nearby, would you like to go? One luckily, the princess of the Goetia family was the first to break the silence. Onade Lovetune the sinner responded with a friendly smile before following the young woman in the direction of that cafe. The teenage duo was in a cafe far from the cannibal neighborhood. After all, although the place was very nice, the cafes there were not exactly to their liking. On the table in front of them was their order, which consisted of a couple of cakes and hot chocolate. One a very nice +1, the freckled man commented. It really was a nice environment, without perverts, murderers, drunks or lunatics in general. In fact, the people here were quite normal. they just ate and talked without paying attention to their surroundings. The princess of the Goetia family smiled happily. Yes, the owner doesn't allow anyone unpleasant to enter. You could say it's a little piece of peace in the shitty hell. Octavia simply sank into the calm that the small cafe offered, enjoying the company that the green-haired man provided her. And tell me, Octavia, does your father give you so much freedom? I thought he wouldn't let you go out without an escort or something like that. From his point of view, it was a very valid question. From what he had seen in Lulu Land, Stolas was quite overprotective of Octavia. He really didn't believe that the man would let her leave without some kind of security. The owl demon nodded calmly. Yeah, usually Dad is a lot more annoying when I want to go out alone, but he gives me some freedom when I come here. The freckled man took a bite of his cake while listening to the young woman's explanation. Onife's that? I asked curiously. Well, basically it's because before leaving he puts a tracking spell on me, protection magic, and picks me up with a portal on of course. That way I could keep her safe even from a distance, or at least know when she was in trouble so I could intervene. But enough about me. Tell me something about yourself. Onahe asked the sinner. The freckled man took a sip of his cup of hot chocolate before answering. There's not much to tell. I'm just a sinner who recently arrived in hell and got a job as an assassin with an imp who just happened to make a deal with your father to go to the human world. Really a very simple story. What about your life when you were human? Were you a murderer too? Onahe asked curiously. No, being a murderer is something more recent. When he was human he was really someone too average, just a teenager who went to school and had silly dreams of greatness. Onahe's indifference to that subject was notable, but he really didn't like to think about his life as a human. Tell me something. Is it true that humanity gained powers? I read about it in one of Dad's books, but I've never seen them. The freckled man gave a small nod to his companion. Yes, up there we call them quirks. You should see them. Some of them give such rare mutations that sinners down here could easily pass as normal people. Onahe responded with slight emotion. It seemed that some of his fanaticism for gifts still lingered inside him. Octavia seemed to cheer up with the freckled man's spare parts. Onite's very interesting. In Dad's book it said that gifts influence the abilities that sinners obtain when they arrive here. Your gift must have been very powerful to turn you into such a big and intimidating demon. Onahe was truly an impressive person, even with a very wide range of skills for any newly arrived sinner. For some reason, the green-haired sinner seemed to react negatively to his comment. Had he said something wrong? He didn't believe it. Is everything all right? She couldn't help but let a tone of concern filter into her voice. She didn't know what was happening to her, but it was very strange to see the murderer in front of her acting like that. Maybe they had only met once before this, but even with their few encounters in her mind she had already formed an idea of what the demon in front of her was like, and she really didn't believe that this way of acting was normal for him. Onite's not your fault. I just remembered some unpleasant things. Oni, a very ambiguous answer. What could be so bad that he would react like that? Shit, she wasn't good with that emotional stuff, mainly because in her family practically only her dad cared, although she didn't talk to him about that stuff because it would be awkward and she didn't really have any other friends she could have comforted, so Octavia's experience helping people going through bad times was minimal at best. Still, he simply couldn't and didn't want to leave his only friend like that, so he gathered the courage to ask him the only question that came to mind for this situation. Do you want to talk about it? After asking the question, silence reigned between them for a few minutes, long enough for Octavia to worry that she had screwed up. Luckily, his fears proved unfounded when the green-haired man finally broke his silence. Unlike down here, when he was human he wasn't impressive at all, just a high school boy who everyone hated because he didn't have a quirk. Octavia listened in silence to the freckled man's words. She didn't know many sinners, but if she had read about humans in her father's books and if she had come to a conclusion from all that, it was that humans were shit, especially with those they considered different. You didn't have to be a genius to know how they would treat someone who was not only different, but also weaker than them. When the peculiarities appeared, a new job came with them, the heroes, people who used their quirks to protect others and stop the villains. For a long time, I dreamed of being one of them, a stupid dream for someone without powers, I know, but back then I believed that if I wished it with all my being, at some point I would have the opportunity to achieve it. How stupid was I? The sinner's tale was getting darker and darker, and Octavia didn't like where this was going. Izuku took a moment to take another sip of his hot chocolate before continuing with his story. Everyone told me that my dream was silly, that I should look for something more realistic, but despite that I kept dreaming, people hated me. Even the one I considered my friend once told me to kill myself and that I should pray to have a gift in my next life. Octavia didn't even blink. Death didn't mean much when you literally lived in hell, but despite that, she couldn't help but realize how much this affected the freckled man. One day, I met him, All Might, the greatest hero of my country and my idol. I clung to him and asked him the question that I had kept from me for so long: can someone without a quirk be a hero? My hopes died quickly when he told me it was impossible. I couldn't stand it, and as soon as he left, I threw myself off the building I was on. Oniya's shitty story, really. Maybe he could use his father's influence to give those two a punishment when they got down here. He doubted that people like that went to heaven. Would that make Izuku happy? She placed her hand on the freckled man's shoulder, who had bent his face towards the ground, preventing Octavia from seeing him. When she touched him, she could feel him trembling. She leaned her body forward to see the freckled man's expression. It wasn't what she expected. He thought he would see pain or sadness, but instead, the green-haired man's expression showed nothing but the most intense and pure rage. His emerald gaze had sharpened. His lips had retracted, showing his sharp fangs in all their splendor. A slight growl that sounded like an animal about to attack emanated from his throat. His claws were extended and looked sharp enough to easily disembowel a man. He could even feel how his scales had bristled, becoming sharper to the touch. Octavia looked at the freckled man completely stunned. She had never seen him get so angry. She felt a kind of heat growing in her chest. That attitude in the green-haired sinner was almost like her father would say. Exciting. It was only then that the sinner seemed to realize his brief angry state. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself. His claws retracted and his expression returned to its natural calm. "I'm sorry, Octavia. I seem to have lost control for a moment." There was no response. Octavia. When he looked at his companion, he saw her with a strange expression and her cheeks flushed. Something wrong? What was that expression supposed to mean? I really couldn't understand women. Hearing her companion's voice, Octavia came out of the complicated thoughts in which her mind had sunk. She did not understand what was happening to her. It was almost as if her abilities to control her own mind and body declined in the presence of that green-haired sinner. It's nothing," Onahe shouted while waving his hands. Under no circumstances could he tell the freckled man what his mind had shown him. Ignoring those thoughts and taking a few deep breaths to calm herself, the princess of the Goisha family was finally able to control those impulses. And tell me, have you thought about what you'll do when you see them again?" It was better to change the subject to something other than what had just happened. Ignoring the peculiar behavior of his companion and concentrating on the new topic of conversation, the freckled man showed a smile that to any outside observer would seem quite worrying. "Oni'll make sure to cause them as much pain as they caused me." Revenge, a concept that in life would never have crossed the mind of the freckled man, but now, it seemed so sweet that he could hardly resist taking the book from the office and going to the world of the living to take care of all those who had made his life a hell. Blitz had been right with his business model. When hope, faith and everything else has been lost, only the darkest feelings like revenge are left behind to keep souls alive, with a purpose. He longed for the moment when he would once again lock eyes with all those who had hurt him. He dreamed of their screams, of their claws cutting his skin and destroying their bodies, of paying back every blow, wound, and burn they had inflicted on him. They had done this to him. They had forced him to end his life. That was why he had ended up here. After all, if it hadn't been suicide, why else would he have ended up in hell? He had never hurt anyone. He always wished the best for everyone, even those who hurt him. He would make sure to destroy them very slowly for that. But he wouldn't go after them, at least not yet. He wouldn't be foolish enough to throw himself completely into his revenge. It might be hell, but he was building a good life down here. He wouldn't disappoint Blitz or break his trust by taking the book for personal reasons. He would make sure to have down here everything that had been denied to him in the human world. So he would simply wait. His work as an assassin had already taken him all over the world. He had visited most of the countries in the human world, murdering countless people day by day. It was only a matter of time before they took a job in Japan, before his path crossed again with those who had done so much harm to him, not just All Might and Bakugo. He would hunt down everyone who had denied him his dream, everyone who beat him, humiliated him and laughed at his misfortune every day. Who knows? Maybe they would even hire him to kill some of them. That would only make his revenge juicier. Then and only then would he take care of them. Izuku, he was a patient man. He could wait as long as necessary. Ignoring the dark thoughts in the freckled man's mind, the young Goisha continued speaking. I see. But have you thought about what would happen if they get to hell? The freckled man abruptly stopped his thoughts upon hearing those words. If they got down here? He hadn't thought about it. Kachan, All Might and everyone else were humans. Sooner or later they would die. While he as a demon wouldn't age, he would simply remain alive down here. The idea of sharing a world with them again displeased him, but could he really do anything to prevent it? He could deduce based on the personalities of most of the people on his death list that if they hadn't done something to come down here it was only a matter of time before it happened, and then what? I guess nothing. I understand that down here even if you hurt a sinner, they will simply regenerate after a while. It's really not worth destroying them every time they heal. There was no choice. He might have to run into them a couple of times here, and although he wouldn't like it, he really had no choice in the matter. Unlike him, who thought about the subject quite deeply, Via seemed much calmer as she continued eating her cake. Onight's true. Or you can erase them from existence using divine weapons. Izuku was completely paralyzed upon hearing those words. Erase them from existence? Was that possible? Yes. The only way a sinner dies is by killing him with a divine weapon that completely eliminates them from existence. Onohe had no idea that divine weapons existed, but would he really use them? Yes, he hated All Might, Bakugo and everyone else who had hurt him a lot, but it was one thing to kill them and send them to heaven or hell, but it was quite another to erase them completely. He would have to think a lot about whether to make that decision. Still, it wouldn't hurt to be informed. And, if I wanted to eliminate someone from existence, where could I get a divine weapon? Again. The owl-like demon continued eating her dessert, unconcerned that she was being asked for information with which one could permanently eliminate someone from existence. Well, the main dealer of the Ring of Pride is Camilla Carmen. She has most of the divine weaponry in hell, although she rarely sells it. I heard she keeps most of it for her own use. Onin, important fact, there really should be more information about what happens down here. It's strange that you don't know. After all, you got your weapons from her. The girl pointed out. The freckled man looked at his weapons more carefully, noticing that on the handle there was a small seal with a large C in the middle. Wow, it's one of those things you don't realize until someone mentions it. Onohe assumed that the store was owned by this Carmen. The ringing of a phone interrupted the duo's conversation. Via took out her phone showing an annoyed expression when she read the screen. It's Dad, he wants me to come home now. The sinner nodded. The last thing he wanted was for Octavia's terrifying father to get upset with him. I understand. Well, you have my number. You can call me another time to chat. Onin almost undetectable blush covered the girl's cheeks. Yes, it would be nice. They both stood up, walking to the exit of the cafeteria after paying for their food. See you soon, Izuku. The girl said goodbye before a portal appeared right in front of her, which she went through without even giving it a glance. See you, Octavia. As soon as he said those words, the portal closed. Now alone again, the freckled man gave a brief look at his surroundings. Okay, now what? Maybe he should have asked Octavia for some recommendations for places to visit before he left. I had been walking aimlessly around Pentagram City for quite some time, looking for something to see or do, but I hadn't had much success in that regard. None of the places she had seen on her tour had caught her attention, although the number of sex shops she had seen on her walk was impressive, not to mention the countless signs promoting TV channels, porn sites, clothing stores and something called Love Potion, which made her suspect it was some kind of date rape drug. He continued exploring the place without paying much attention to these matters when a group of people gathered caught his attention. Curious to see what had caught the attention of such a large number of people, he approached with the intention of getting a better look at what was happening. It was certainly a curious sight to say the least, a sort of fight between a one-eyed, white-skinned woman against a sinner who had the appearance of a hydra, with a large, stocky body that had 3 long necks with draconic heads. The hydra-like man carried a high-caliber machine gun which he used to try to riddle the one-eyed girl who did a few somersaults in the air, dodging the bullets while throwing some round explosives similar to those in the cartoons. He arrived just in time to see one of the girl's bombs pierce through the hydra's defenses, exploding in its stomach and scattering its guts all over the place. Yeah, you sons of bitches. Who's next? Who dares to fight me for territory? 1. The freckled man turned away, ignoring the screams of the Cyclops woman. So it was a territorial fight. He heard that they were quite common here between sinners who sought to assert their dominance over a certain part of the city, not that it was particularly of interest to him. He made his way through the crowd that had gathered to watch the fight. He had no interest in staying to see if there would be another fight. As he left the gathered group, a certain someone passed by him, neither of them paying attention to the other's presence, at least until the stranger tripped over the freckled man's tail, dropping a small transparent bag filled with a white powder, which landed in the Hydra's open stomach just as another bomb exploded, sending the sinner flying to some unknown location. 1. My drugs. 1. The tall, extremely thin figure with 4 arms and white fur screamed. The stranger's scream seemed to catch the attention of the Cyclops woman who had fought with the other sinner moments before. 1. Angie. What happened? 1. The woman looked really worried about who she assumed was her friend. She ignored him. She really didn't care. 1. That son of a bitch made me throw away my drugs. MHA pointed his finger directly at the green-haired man. The rest of the demons in the place moved aside, leaving a clear path between the couple and the freckled man. 1. HUH. 1. No ticking how the demons had moved, the freckled man turned around to finally realize what was in the center of attention. The sinner with 4 arms approached him with an air of fury surrounding him. 1. You fucking son of a bitch. You owe me 3 doses of drugs. 1. I had no idea what this guy was talking about, but of course he wasn't going to pay anything. I'm not going to give you shit. 1. MHA turned around again with the intention of leaving, but unfortunately the duo didn't seem willing to allow him to do so. The one-eyed woman stepped forward. 1. Didn't even think you'll get away with it so easily, you son of a bitch. 1. After releasing his threat, he threw one of his explosives at the green-haired man. Realizing the attack against him, the freckled man turned around, flapped his enormous wings in front of him, causing a current of air that sent the bomb back to the sinner who had thrown it. 1. Shit. 1. Seeing the bomb heading towards the duo, both sinners jumped to the side, narrowly avoiding the blast. Standing in his place, the freckled man turned around, this time prepared to face the duo. Under no circumstances would he leave an attack against him unanswered. 1. They shouldn't have done that. They're really screwed now. MHA drew his 2 pistols and aimed at his new targets. The pair of friends immediately stood up, recovering in an instant. From the lower abdomen of the white-furred man came out an extra pair of arms holding 2 machine guns, while the one-eyed woman took out several more bombs. The subject who accused him of losing his drugs immediately opened fire. Hundreds of bullets were fired at the green-haired man, who used one of his wings to cover himself from the attack, while the stranger's friend ran to the side of the freckled man, advancing to the area of his body where there was no wing covering him, throwing 3 more bombs at the freckled man. Realizing the sinful Cyclops' attempt to hurt him, he aimed one of his pistols at the bombs, firing 3 accurate shots that made the bombs explode in the air before they had a chance to touch him. Then he aimed at the one-eyed sinner, who was able to bend her body backwards to be able to dodge the shot in the air. Seeing that it wouldn't be as easy to get rid of these 2 as it was with his more common targets, the freckled man changed his strategy, moved his wing enough to have a direct line of sight with the spider demon and fired a round of fire breath from his mouth. 1. Shit. 1. The spider-like demon leapt to the side, narrowly avoiding the fire attack, which caused it to stop firing, which the freckled man took advantage of to reholster his pistols and pull out the big gun. The minigun, which was his favorite weapon, pointed at the spider demon, who looked quite worried when he saw the 6 barrels of the freckled man's weapon pointing directly at him. It certainly wouldn't be pleasant. 1. Enter. 1. Her Cyclops-like friend screamed upon seeing the threat the porn actor was under. She saw a V's ad on a nearby rooftop, so without hesitation she threw one of her bombs at the base of the ad, causing it to fall from the building where it had been placed. The ad crashed to the ground in front of Angel Dust. Without wasting a second, the girl jumped on her friend and pushed her until they were both under the ad. Just then, the freckled man fired his gun, causing a burst of bullets to fly at the duo. Luckily for both of them, Cherry Bomb's plan had succeeded. The sign he had knocked down was serving quite well as a barrier against the bullets. 1. Who the fuck is this guy? 1. The sound of bullets hitting metal prevented her question from being easily heard, yet the porn actor's friend was able to hear it. 1. I have no idea, but it's obvious that he's not the typical loser we usually fight against. 1. Realizing that his weapon was ineffective against the dozens of centimeters of steel that made up the sign, the freckled man changed his strategy. Taking a deep breath, His throat turned a deep red as he began to gather fire and concentrate it in his throat before firing it all in a concentrated heat blast at the advertisement of that strange demon with a face like a flat-screen TV. Almost immediately, the metal that made up the sign began to turn red as the heat began to cover its entire surface. One shit. One, the porn actor screamed as he felt the hand he was holding on the ad burn. The heat was so intense that the metal that was in direct contact with the heat ray that emanated from the freckled man's throat began to melt. One, damn, this shit won't last long. One, at this rate the ad would become a mere puddle. One, there's no time, how many bombs do you have left? One, Cherry smiled, taking out several bombs that she held in her two hands with a malicious smile. One, I know that smile, Angie, you have a crazy plan, don't you? Onia's smile graced the porn actor's face, revealing one of his gold teeth. One, there are two of us and that bastard is one. You go to the right, I'll go to the left. He can't take on both at the same time. One, although her chances of success were not very good despite that plan, it did not seem to bother the Cyclops, who simply responded with an excited smile. Ona, let's did. One, instantly, both of them left their hiding places, running to both sides of the freckled man who continued firing his heat ray, so it took him a moment to react to the attack of those two. Angel unholstered his two machine guns while the girl threw her bombs. Both attacks used almost at the same time from two different sides of the freckled man. Without even hesitating, the green-haired man turned around in the direction where the bombs were coming from, flapping his wings strongly again, deflecting the bombs that fell against the street in front of him, after which he flapped his wings, giving him a boost that allowed him to advance until he was in front of the one-eyed girl, whom he grabbed by the neck. One, let me go, you son of a bitch. One, despite her screams and attempts to break free, the freckled man's grip did not loosen in the slightest. One, let go of my dog friend. One, the other spider-like guy who had started all this yelled from behind the green-haired man, opening fire at his back. Unfortunately for him, it was instantly clear that his shots were useless as the bullets ricocheted off the scales on his back. As it was clear that shooting was useless, Angel tried something else. Without thinking much, he jumped against the freckled man's back in an attempt to knock him unconscious with his weapons. What Angel Dust never expected was that guy's tail would turn into a snake that stretched out and quickly headed towards him. The snake wrapped around his body, squeezing him quite tightly, although not in the way he liked. One, let us go, you bastard. One, her friend tried in vain to threaten this guy with whom they had tried to start the fight. What really pissed him off was hearing the guy with black scales start to laugh, making fun of both of them. One, I told them they were screwadone, and without saying another word, the snake that came out of that guy's ass bit him in the neck at the same time that the guy with scales spit out a yellow ray from his damn mouth that hit Cherry directly. She watched as her friend's skin burned from the intensity of the electricity that ran through her body, how she began to convulse, and finally how she had fainted from the pain. It was at that moment that the snake that was holding him uncoiled from his body, leaving him free. One, son of a bitch. One, blinded by anger, he tried to throw himself against the green-haired guy to hit him with all his strength, but he couldn't even move a muscle before everything turned red, but not the red he saw when he was blinded by anger. He felt a liquid running from his eyes. Was he crying? He brought his hand to his face to wipe the liquid away, only to realize that he wasn't crying. There was blood coming out of his eyes. One, that? Onahe tried to ask, but was unable to continue speaking when he vomited a large amount of blood. Suddenly his body fell to the ground. He could no longer control it. He felt each of his muscles and limbs shudder and move without being able to control it, each movement causing him intense pain. Somehow he gathered the strength to look directly at the guy who had made him throw away his drugs. Both of them exchanged glances. One, what did you do to me? Onahe met a cold and indifferent gaze that looked down at him as if he were scum. One, the poison that is injected into you causes your blood to clot at the same time, causing quite painful spasms. Do you like it? Only a normal human would already be dead, but since he was a sinner it would only cause him very strong and prolonged pain, not to mention not letting him move for a long time. Seeing that the fight was over, the demons in the area began to approach the place again. One defeated Cherry Bomb and Angel Dustone. A demon commented, quite surprised. Onahe took over the territory. One, another equally surprised demon let out. Murmurs filled the place at the same time as everyone began to talk about this stranger who had taken over the place. One, the territory? Onahe took a look around the place, observing the dirty alleys that were full of drunks and perverts. One, why would he want this garbage can? Tell him when he wakes up that he can have it. One without giving any further explanation to the sinners who had gathered at the place, the freckled man turned around and left the place. Everyone moved aside to let him pass easily. After seeing his fight, no one had the intention of being in the sights of this stranger. Izuku walked through the streets of the city with a slight annoyance. This was supposed to be a quiet walk, but other than his lunch with Octavia everything had been shit. He let out a sigh that contained considerable irritation. Maybe it was time to return to Imp City. A female squeal stopped him in his tracks. He turned around to see where it had come from, only to see a white-skinned girl wearing a red outfit, who had knocked over some of the many rolls of wallpaper she was carrying. He could have just turned away and ignored her, it wasn't his problem. Ona, let's go. But for some reason he stood there, silently watching the girl who was trying to pick up the rolls of wallpaper on the floor. The freckled man let out a sigh of annoyance. He wondered why he had stopped doing these things after she died. Well, he guessed it was just an old bad habit. I walked towards the girl in the red suit. You want help? Hearing him, the girl looked up. Stars seemed to form in her eyes when she saw him. Of course. Even though the scream she let out was heard too energetic, the girl seemed to quickly realize what had surprised the stranger who had offered her his help, so she cleared her throat before speaking again, this time with a much calmer voice. Yes, I would appreciate it. Keeping silent, the freckled man took a considerable portion of the wallpaper rolls, taking advantage of his size, much larger than the girl, to calmly carry all the things. Neither of them said a word, they just walked in silence while the girl guided them both until they ended up on a mountain located at one of the points of the pentagram where there was a kind of building halfway through its construction. And we arrived. How much do I owe you? After dropping the rolls of wallpaper, the girl took out some bills which she offered to the freckled man. It's okay. I don't want anything. His answer seemed to greatly surprise the girl, whose eyes lit up like stars. You say, you helped me just by doing it? Unsure of what was happening, the freckled man nodded. You are perfect. The excited girl screamed, still without giving the freckled boy any clue about what was happening.
Thank you. Suddenly, the girl took his hand, squeezing it with a strong grip. Do you want to stay at my hotel? Okay. Now I've completely lost track of this conversation. That. From the girl's expression, it seemed to the sinner that she had barely noticed and had not given any explanation as to what was happening. Sure, let me introduce myself first. My name is Charlie Morningstar. The princess of Helluva gave a small bow at the end that looked quite practiced. It took a few seconds for his brain to process the girl's words. Princess. Indifferent to the sinner's shock, the girl nodded, maintaining a rather cheerful smile. Yes, you know, Lucifer's daughter. Lucifer, the angel that God banished to hell, had a daughter. You see, this is my little project, the Happy Hotel. A place for the souls of sinners to redeem themselves and ascend to heaven. Redemption, was that possible? At the moment it is still under construction and we only have one tenant, but I think you would be perfect for the place. You would have a free room, food, and you could do the exercises together with everyone to be able to redeem yourself. Ona'd never heard of redemption before and wasn't sure it was even possible, but I had to admit the free room sounded tempting. He saw the princess looking at them with huge eyes full of hope and joy, something he hadn't seen down here until now. Need to think about it. Onehe didn't want to close himself off to the idea. It could be his chance to finally move out of the company office. Sure. You know where we are. Come back whenever you want. Onehe immediately spread his wings and took flight back to Imp City, thinking about the offer he had just received from the princess. As Charlie watched the figure of his possible new guest disappear into the sky, a smile adorned his face as he felt his dream gaining more and more strength. I hope Veggie gets back with Angel soon. If only their current host would put more effort into his rehabilitation program, they could finally begin the exercises he hoped would help sinners redeem themselves and ascend to heaven. I couldn't wait for Veggie and Angel to come back so I could tell them this wonderful news. With any luck, the Happy Hotel will have its second tenant soon. Comment down your favorite part from this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.